Oh, shit. Afternoon, everybody. First day back at work after a week off, and I need an energy drink because I've chosen the wrong week to quit smoking, I tell you. I've been living off these for like the last week. So, obviously, a very interesting week or two in the world of sport. And obviously, we can't discuss anything without talking about the sudden and very tragic passing of the great Ricky Hatton, the Hitman, otherwise known as the People's Champion, very suddenly at the age of 46. And look, there's a lot of speculation online, and I think what we've got to understand is that he had a family. He was very well liked, not only in the boxing community but in the wider community and in just the sporting community in general. And the fact that he was so public and open about his struggles post-retirement in 2012 onwards, and he was very, very open and honest and candid about the struggles that he had faced over the last 13 years, I think made it less awkward, especially for men to discuss mental health and addiction. And I think he was a great advocate for positive, mental health discussion. And I think broke down some of the barriers surrounding that. But he was well respected, for being as open and as honest about that. And as someone who obviously, was he my favourite boxer of all time? I think I've got there's boxers who boxed who I enjoyed watching more, just because of maybe they were technically better or how they worked the crowd in the ring. But was he one of the greatest of all time in his field? Yeah. Only 3 men beat him. And the 3 men who beat him were fantastic champions in their own right. But I think it's his advocacy outside the ring, for mental health discussion and, addiction awareness and also for community, young people. He was a fantastic role model, a flawed role model, but a fantastic role model. And I think a very lovable kind of guy you would be more than happy to, sit down in a pub, have a pint with, and just chat about stuff. And it didn't have to be sport, didn't have to be boxing, didn't have to be football. It could be anything. And he was as boxers go, he was very, very humble. You've got to have a certain personality to be a boxer, but as he came across as a very down-to-earth, normal human being that a lot of pro athletes tend to lose. He never lost that. So I think that is something that I think a lot of people will remember, was how down-to-earth and how normal he was. I don't necessarily think he actually liked the celebrity aspect of being a famous athlete. And I think that potentially contributed to some of his struggles outside of the ring and post-retirement. Was that the media following his every move and writing articles and speculation? I think that weighs heavily on a lot of athletes, and I don't think a lot of athletes actually truly like being in the public eye as much as they are. And that is something to discuss. Now, moving on, we've discussed Ricky Hatton, and I'll be happy to take questions on, obviously, Ricky Hatton, the man, and the boxer, and what his legacy leaves behind, and how he's impacted not only boxing, but I think society in a positive way. On a football side of things, there are several managers and several clubs where there's a lot of speculation over the manager's future and whether they're going to get sacked or retained. And there's West Ham, Rangers, Celtic, Man United. These are all clubs that are currently, there's a big discussion around, the future of manager. There's a lot of speculation that managers, could be out of a job. And we shall see. Can the Raiders recover? Well, no team has won the grand final after conceding more than 50 points. And I do think that last regular season game, I think, yeah. They can recover, yes. But we could see a team for the first time ever outside the top four in the NRL era, for example, win the grand final if Penrith go on a run. The Melbourne Storm, no side has conceded 40 consecutive points in more than one game and won the grand final. So the Melbourne Storm in 2 separate games this season conceded 40 unanswered points. So we are going to see history made, I think. I think we are going to see history made. I wouldn't be surprised if the Broncos do it. I think this has been such a strange season with how the Bulldogs and the Raiders, who no one expected to be in the top four, no one expected the Raiders to be minor premiers. I think going forward with this team, I think the potential is there for this to be like with the Penrith Panthers in 2020. This is the trial year where they learn to find their feet, and I think there will be success with this team going forward. Same with the Bulldogs. I think that the Lockie Galvin situation, we'll see how that all pans out. I think that has disrupted the Bulldogs a little bit. But look, I think it's wide open. I think it's a wide open race now. I think it's a wide open race now, honestly. I mean, if the Bulldogs do it, I think that's something that isn't expected either. They were the last team outside of the top four to win the grand final. Admittedly, it's pre-NRL era. So in that regard, it hasn't happened since for 30 years. And that was the Bulldogs doing it. So maybe they can repeat history and they can go on a run in this final series, even though they lost the game against Melbourne. They weren't massively outplayed. It wasn't like a blowout scoreline. I wouldn't be surprised if Penrith win a fifth in a row. If Penrith do that, I think Ivan Cleary's a genius with how he's turned that side around from where they were in the first half of the season to where they've ended up. The Roosters getting knocked out. I'm not surprised with the Roosters not getting past the first weekend of finals. I think there's been a lot of surprises this season. I will say there's been a lot of surprises this season with the NRL and the NRLW. There's been a lot of surprises. I've got to catch a lot of games, to be fair. I haven't been following as religiously the last couple of weeks while the Women's Rugby World Cup's been on and a few other things and a few other things have been happening. It's been a bit hectic on my side of things with work and family and friends and all that. So I've sort of a bit of fatigue. I think a bit of NRL fatigue. I always find in August and September I do get a little bit fatigued with rugby league a little bit. The season is long, and I was actually debating whether to do a video on where I think the 20th team ends up. It's going to be interesting with expansion on the horizon, how the NRL go about the expansion process when it comes to players. We know where the next two teams are going to be. It's about how they fill out their rosters and sign players and get players to go to Perth and go to PNG. I'm more concerned about the PNG team than the Perth team. I do think with Perth, they're going to get players signed. Will they have the same struggles as the Dolphins? We'll see. I think the NRL could do a better job. Let's say like an expansion draft kind of thing, where the existing teams get to protect a list of players, and then the expansion teams get to select players from the non-protected list, like they do in the North American major leagues. I would go for a second New Zealand team. Although there's been talk of potential Pacific Island team, but I would go with a second New Zealand team, or maybe a team on the Central Coast. they're my two options: either Central Coast or South Island, New Zealand. There'll be the two options. There's enough stadium infrastructure. The Central Coast has got a fantastic stadium. It's hosted NRL and NRLW games and internationals. And then on the South Island, you've got the infrastructure there. Even in Wellington, the infrastructure's there. So you could have a second team on the North Island, South Island. It doesn't really matter where you put the team. The infrastructure is there. I think the concern that I have is again getting players to sign and making it a sustainable, profit-making long-term and a successful long-term. I think there are those that are saying that the product has got a bit diluted. But with what's going on over here in the Super League and Championship and League One, no, because the Sharks own their stadium. I think that would be a bad move because they're one of the few clubs that actually own their own real estate. I think the issue is they haven't finished the refurb. That is a problem. But at the same time, it's sort of in their favour that they stays because they own their own. They're one of only two teams to actually own their facility, the other being the Dolphins with KO Stadium. Only two teams at the moment own the facility they play in. All the other teams are tenants. So in that regard, I think the problem is Shark Park is a bit of a dive, but because they own it, they have that kind of asset. And so I can't see them being forced into relocating because they own that asset. And they own some of the assets around the stadium. Now, we know that there's a big discussion about who should pay for stadium upgrades and stadium refurbs and stadium maintenance, etc. Ironically, they are, but they are owned by their clubs. And you can't argue with that. Now, yes, Cronulla aren't necessarily the wealthiest club. In fact, they're one of the least wealthy clubs, but the Dolphins are one of the wealthiest. So swings and roundabouts there. And I think the reason why the NRL chose the Dolphins as the 17th team is because they own the stadium and they had a real good, sound financial footing as a Queensland club with the league's club. They owned their own infrastructure. And I'm surprised they haven't played more games at KO Stadium. I think that's a real head scratcher for me that they play as many games as they do at Suncorp. I would love to see the Dolphins play more games at their actual home stadium. I think that actually might, in my opinion, improve their record. And I hope going forward that the NRL allow them to play more home games outside of playing the Broncos and Magic round at their home ground as their home venue. No, I think part of the reason why they play as many games as they do at Suncorp, I think, is to do with their entry into the NRL. But yeah, the irony is they are the two of the smaller stadiums, yes, but they own them, and it's because obviously what we're seeing, obviously with what's going on with Penrith and the I wouldn't say uncertainty around the West Tigers, because now there is government funding for upgrades to both Leichhardt and Campbelltown, but we've seen issues there. I wouldn't say relocating the Sharks is a good thing. I would say just get that 20th team in. It means more revenue for the league, bigger TV deal for the league, a balanced schedule for the league. Because obviously when PNG come in, if they come in on time in 2028, you're going to have an odd team league again, which means every match day weekend is going to be a bye round for a club. And I'm already not enjoying the bye round as it is. And so, I think that is true. That is true. And that's where some other clubs do struggle, is on the corporate side of things. But in saying that, they've got a strong leagues club. They've got a really good, sound financials off the field. And look how much money they were making as a Queensland Cup side at KO Stadium before they're playing at Suncorp. So they had a lot of money. They are the wealthiest club. So I still find it interesting they play as many games as they do at Suncorp, which for me, I think I've got a bloody insect bite on my leg. For me, I think dilutes. I like the suburban grounds. I like the old school suburban grounds that are sort of similar to what grounds used to be here in the UK. I think more teams should be allowed to play at their home venues. Look, if Belmore could be brought up to a better standard, I think the Bulldogs would play more home games at Belmore. There's been a big discussion about the Bunnies and the Bulldogs playing at a core stadium and how it's pretty much empty most of the time. I mean, the Bulldogs have actually been filling it. Souths haven't. Bulldogs have obviously really had the highest average attendance this season out of the Sydney clubs. Partly because the team are doing much better than what they have been for the best part of a decade. But there's been a big debate about, for the most part, how for a long time the Bulldogs and Souths, a core stadium, is really it's not suitable. And I think if you could get Redfern Oval and you could get Belmore and funding for them to be brought up to modern standards, same with the old North Sydney Oval. I mean, that's why the Bears are actually going to Perth rather than North Sea. But if you could get these stadiums up to a better standard where you could have 10 to 15, maybe 20,000 in the stadium, wouldn't that be better? And when people say, "Oh, there's too many teams in Sydney," I mean, I'm going to stop these people right now because Sydney's a population of nearly 5-6 million people in Greater West, in the Greater Sydney Metro, including other cities outside of the Metro that are within distance, like Wollongong, for example. We're talking about 6 million people in that part of New South Wales alone, and within travelling distance. And if you include Canberra in there and Wollongong and then Central Coast and Newcastle, within a couple of hours distance is the majority of the population in New South Wales, which is equivalent to the population of London here in the UK. Look how many football and rugby union teams we have in London. Then you add on the London Broncos as a club with a smaller fan base, yes. A couple of ice hockey teams. Look how many professional, semi-professional teams London sustains. No one is saying London has got too many sports teams. I find that a ridiculous argument. But it's like, I just find, same with Melbourne. I find that a ridiculous argument that you can have too many teams at the same level or a professional level in a city. I find that weird. I do find that very, very odd. And of course, that corporate money, if they can actually get a much improved international TV deal, not just Australia, but international, so if they can continue to improve the viewership in the US, then the corporate money will improve. At which point you become less reliant on the corporate boxes in regards in stadium when you get in these overseas sponsors and advertisers and TV deals. That's why, for example, the Premier League has become so successful and European football has become so successful. I believe they were considering it, yes. I think the AFL seems to copy a lot of what Rugby League does. They've obviously copied Magic Round. They've had Origin before. I'm going to have to double check that, but I did a video on Origin before and I got, a lot of crap from Aussie rules fans for it. And the AFL, I think, is on the back foot a little bit because the women's AFLW is losing them money. And Victoria, Western Australia. That works for the AFL because that's their two heartlands, really. I know they've obviously got teams in Adelaide and South Australia, and they've obviously got teams on the East Coast. But that I think could work really well if they get the marketing right. They didn't in the past. There's a reason why it failed the first time, and they didn't really get any consistency. And the NR, what is now the NRL Rugby League as a sport, got that head start. Now, there's been a big debate around State of Origin, and could they hype it up a bit more? Could there be a better way of promoting it? I'll have to double check when they want to bring in this state of origin and how they're going to fit it into the AFL schedule. Because I heard there was rumours like they might bring the idea back. They might consider looking at the possibility. When I did that video earlier this year, that they were considering their options around shaking things up a little bit. But you've got to remember, the AFL copied Magic Round with Gather Round. They obviously they were the ones that brought in the Women's League before the NRL did. But they expanded too fast, too quick, haven't got the talent, and the women's game is I watched the women's game. Who was I watched? It Collingwood versus Geelong or Carlton? No, it was Collingwood Carlton. I watched the other day, about a couple of weeks back, and it was decent, but room for improvement. That's what I see with the AFLW is the game that I watched was decent, room for a lot of improvement, but you could see that they were putting their best efforts in, they were trying. You could see that they were enjoying having that opportunity to play. Just it wasn't very good, and I'm not knocking them because Aussie rules is a very, very physically demanding and brutal sport. It is. But the AFL has definitely got that women's strategy dreadfully wrong, and it is costing them a lot of money. And so I can see why they want to bring in a state of origin kind of series is to recoup some of those massive losses that the women's game is generating. Even though the sport as a whole and the league as a whole is profitable, the women's AFLW is where they're losing the most money. It's a money pit. No, you can have short players. You have short players in Aussie rules as well. But it's a different type of physicality to rugby league and rugby union and ice hockey, the other big, brutal team contact sports. Yes, there are more taller players. But the NBA and the AFL, you will find shorter players. But even the short players are still pretty tall. I think that there are certain attributes that are more suited to, let's say, Aussie rules than rugby league. It's a different type of physicality, a different type of skill set required. But Mason Cox, I think, is the tallest player at the moment in the AFL, if I'm not mistaken. And he is an ex-basketball player, collegiate basketball player, the American Mason Cox. He was a basketball player. I think it was for it was either a Texas university or an Arizona or a Utah university. It was one of those Southwestern universities. And he went to a combine about 10, 15 years ago for the AFL. And ultimately, he ended up getting a contract and becoming one of the more recognisable faces of the AFL to a wider global audience and to the American audience. He's an ex-basketball player. So, yes, there is that crossover in that regard. But obviously, the NBA is nowhere near as physical as the AFL. Nowhere near. I think it was held in the US. I think it was held in LA, if I remember. I'm going to have to look up Mason Cox and where was it? Actually, I was going to have to. I think it was held in the US. I believe it was held in either LA or San Diego. I know they held it in California. And he was from I think it was a Texas university. I could be wrong, and I will stand corrected if I am. But if I remember, I'm gonna look it up now. You've got me looking it up now. Mason Aussie rules. Here we go. Coxilla. Wow, he's 34. Wow. He plays as a ruckman and a key forward. He is a bloody tall bloke. I will say that. He has to wear those protective glasses now. I don't know. It's like very similar to Edgar Davids. And remember Edgar Davids, the Dutch football player who had to wear because he had a weird eye condition where he had problems. I think Mason Cox has a similar issue, unless he's had an injury. He first played in 2014, and he made his AFL debut in 2016. So he's been playing for 11 years. Oklahoma State in the Big 12. He's 6'11", or 211 centimeters. So he is the tallest player ever to be measured at an AFL draft combine. He's from Texas. I knew he was from Texas. He was drafted in 2015. He's played 138 games and scored 125 goals. Right, here we go. Let's have a look. Cox was invited to attend the 2014 US International Combine for potential Australian rules footballers in LA in April 2014, despite knowing very little at all about the sport. They did skills testing. He travelled to Australia for a second combine on May 30th of that year, and Collingwood signed him. Port Adelaide, North Melbourne, Richmond and Fremantle were also basically scouting him at the time. He was selected 60th overall in the 2015 draft. And then he played for the Collingwood Reserves in the VFL, which is their minor league affiliate, for the 2015 season. He was known for his goal kicking. And then in the 2016 NAB Challenge, which is their pre-season, he played there. And then he did the first 2 games of the 2016 VFL. And then he got called up on the 25th of April 2016 in the Anzac Day game against Essendon. And the rest is history. He's the second American-born AFL player after Don Pike. He wants to stay in Australia for the rest of his life. He became an Aussie citizen in 2022. And Bryce Cotton, who's an American basketball player, they are good friends, apparently. His older brothers also now play Aussie rules. One plays in the US AFL. Actually, no, 2 of them. One played and one currently plays. And he has shown an interest in promoting the game in the US at grassroots level. Yeah. Right. Here we go. The prescription sunglasses in competition. He tore his retina in 2019 against the Gold Coast Suns, and a detached retina in the other eye after an on-field altercation in the 2018 Grand Final. He's had 6 eye surgeries. After the 2019 injury, he had to spend 2 weeks in bed in a darkened room for 45 minutes each hour, calling it the darkest moment of his life. So that's why he wears the glasses. He's had 6 eye surgeries. Fucking still playing. Yeah, so there's plenty of non-Aussies. There's loads of Irish ex-Gaelic football players, both men and women, who've gone over to Australia to play Aussie rules. There's more women of Irish origin than men, but there's a fair number of Irish who've played Gaelic football. And because the GAA, the Gaelic Athletic Association, all their sports are amateur, the lure of professionalism is there, and the closest equivalent sport you're going to get to Gaelic football is Aussie rules. So there's a lot of Irish who've gone over. Mason Cox is not the first American, but there's not that many. Because I've got to see how many non-Australian. I think there's a couple of Kiwis who play as well. But what's his name? Rugby league player. Warbrick, who plays for the Melbourne Storm, actually started out as an Aussie rules player. But yeah, I know there's a lot of Irish. I haven't followed the AFL as religiously as I used to. I used to before COVID. I was watching it more regularly. Since COVID, I've only watched a handful of games, and I would say I haven't fallen out of love with Aussie rules, but I'm not watching it as religiously as I did 6, 7, 8 years ago, and before that as a kid. It's a very interesting sport to me how it developed, how they use basically a cricket pitch, and how the sport evolved from the other footballing codes. It's a very interesting sport, and I've got to look at that, how the sport actually, the evolution of the sport, the beginnings of the sport. I've got to look into the history of it. Yeah, New Zealand's a weird one. I mean, obviously, both codes of rugby are just religions down there, and I'm having my ongoing battles right now with a couple of rugby union fans from New Zealand who seem to be obsessed with personally attacking me over the last 2 days, and really need to get back on their fucking meds because it's embarrassingly sad. All because I don't think that Black Ferns are playing at their best. Apparently, I have a bias, and I'm disrespectful, and I don't have a fucking clue about rugby, even though I've watched and played for 33 years. My best mate's cousin's PSB is a Springbok, and I've met the great Jonah Lomu. My dad played for the Army, both league and union, actually. I've met the Underwood brothers. I went to school with Will Carling's son. One of my mates at school plays for Bristol Bears. Apparently, I don't know anything about rugby, apparently. Mad, that, isn't it? But no, I do find it interesting that it's not AFL mad, but it's interesting how New Zealand's gone on a rugby union and rugby league direction, and cricket, and Australia went with a rugby league and AFL direction in regards to and cricket. It's interesting how the geography works as well. I think possibly because New Zealand's obviously closer to the East Coast, which is rugby league centric and rugby union centric in regards to the oval balls, whereas Melbourne Westwards is AFL, is the dominant code or sport. But on the New Zealand side of things, every country, it's like certain sports do well in certain countries. Like field hockey is the national sport of India. It's not cricket. Polo is the national sport of Argentina, and I think Uruguay as well. People don't realise that. Like, people think football or rugby is the national sports of some of these countries, or cricket in India. It's not. Is it 70% of field hockey sticks are made in Karachi in Pakistan? Some people are really surprised by some countries' national sports. Yeah, the Barassi. I don't know why it's called the Barassi line, but it is. But I think the geography and the Barassi line, I think that has a part to play in why New Zealand is more rugby focused than Aussie rules, and why Aussie rules hasn't really worked in New Zealand. There's not to say Kiwis haven't played it, because they have. Will Warbrick is an ex-Aussie rules player, which is why he's very, very good at the aerial contest as a player. And he's openly said, yeah, played Aussie rules, really enjoy it. And there's a reason why I think a lot of rugby league clubs do the training, off-season training with Aussie rules clubs as well, in regards to the kicking and catching and marking. And then a lot of the Aussie rules will look at the tackle technique and the collision. And so there's a crossover there where I think there's a mutual respect between the players and the clubs, if not the media. I think the media don't have the respect, and some of the fans don't have the respect, but I think the actual players and the coaches and the club officials behind the scenes have a respect for each other in regards of, the two sports. I think the AFL governance looks down its nose at rugby league in a similar way rugby union does. But it's like some other sports, like I think it's a difficult one. I do think geography has had a part to play, and I think also the early colonists who went over they were more rugby players. I think that's had an impact on the first Europeans to go over, and in large numbers were rugby players. And that sort of stuck. I'll have to look at the history of Aussie rules and why it's flourished in Australia, especially western half of Australia, the Barassi line, but why it hasn't really taken off anywhere else. You could argue some of its roots are in Gaelic football. There is that skill crossover. And there were obviously a lot of Irish who ended up in Australia. And they obviously would have taken, their Gaelic football with them. And it's evolved alongside the rugby codes. And it's sort of evolved into what is now Aussie rules AFL, VFL. Because there's so many people of Irish descent around the world. And I think that's where a big component of the growth comes from. Less Irish went to New Zealand as well. Far more Irish immigrants went to Australia, both before Federation and after, and especially after World War I and World War II. A lot of Irish left both Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland and went overseas. There was a big wave of Irish, immigration to North America and the colonies from the 1850s onwards, massive waves of it. And with places like Australia, there's mining jobs, the railways were getting built, a variety of options, and it was obviously, guess what? A lot of land, a lot of cheap land, and more Scots went to New Zealand and Welsh, which is more rugby union, and more Irish went to Australia. Very few Irish went to New Zealand in comparison to elsewhere in the former British Empire. I think the top destination for the Irish to go was the US, but again, I find it interesting then that the Gaelic Athletic Association sports like hurling, because bear in mind you've got lacrosse in North America, so I'm very surprised that hurling, for example, didn't really grow massively in the US. That surprises me a little bit. And then you look at other countries outside of British influence, where you've got either Spanish or French influence, where ironically, like Argentina and Uruguay, for example, rugby union is exceptionally popular, as well as football. You look at Italy, some of their early football clubs are cricket clubs. Who knew? And you look at other places around the world, and you look at the US, and it is very interesting. You look at Canada. Canada goes with ice hockey. The US goes with sports like baseball and American football. And while Canada has Canadian football, Canada's main sport is ice hockey. The US, ironically, their main sport for many, many years was actually baseball until about the 50s, 60s. When the Super Bowl comes about, that's when the change, the shift from America's pastime, which is baseball, which is based off rounders, and softball, which is based off cricket, suddenly shifts to American football. When the NFL and the Super Bowl become a thing, and the NFL becomes the dominant form of American football, and I think that's the Lombardi Trophy and all that. When that happens in the late 50s, early 60s, so the onset of colour TV and the big networks really establishing themselves, that's the dynamic shift between baseball and American football. And I think it was when the American Football League and the National Football League merged to basically be the NFL. When that happens, Major League Baseball still has the American League and the National League, whereas the NFL becomes a unified league, the NBA becomes a unified league. Obviously, at the end of the 70s, the NHL and the WHA become unified leagues, and these are the top league. But baseball still hasn't fully got rid of the National and American League. They still haven't done that. But there's a turning point. And it is in the late 50s, early 60s, where we go from baseball being the dominant sport in the US to American football. For some reason, there's a I don't know exactly when that crossover happens, but there's that moment. And as they say, the rest is history. And Major League Baseball's got its struggles right now. Cricket's still popular in the Netherlands now. Yes, it was the Prince of Orange, William the Second of. Is it William the Second or William the Third? William the Second of the Netherlands. I've actually met the current king of the Netherlands in 2003 when he's Crown Prince, Prince of Orange. But William of Orange, who served alongside the Duke of Wellington at Waterloo and in the Peninsular War, in the build-up to the 100 Days campaign, when they're actually based in what is now modern-day Belgium, which at the time was part of the Netherlands as one of its provinces, because before 1830, was it 1836? Oh, I've got to check now. There was a civil war in Holland and Belgium, and the Netherlands is one country and Belgium is the other one. They were playing cricket. Yes, the Dutch and the Dutch still play cricket now. They've got a one-day team. They've got a T20. They're not a test nation, which I think is really surprising, because a lot of the Dutch went to South Africa and became what we now call the Afrikaners. A lot of Dutch went to what is now South Africa, the Transvaal, Natal, Orange Free State. And both the British and the Dutch go to South Africa, and they took cricket with them. There you go. So, yes, the Dutch still play cricket now. They're a non-test playing, but they are an ICC member. They do have a one-day team. They do have a T20 team, and Dutch players do play in the county cricket system. They do play in the various T20 competitions, and I think a few Dutch players actually play their domestic cricket all over the world. So yes, Holland does have cricket. It's still very popular now. It's not as popular as it was in the 1820s, 1830s, 1840s, 1850s. True, but again, it's a sport that they play that may surprise people. The fact that they're not a test nation is what surprises me, considering that they are one of the first nations to play the sport and play the sport at a reasonably high level. But no, it is very popular in Holland. A lot of Dutch people do play cricket. It's not as well advertised and well known as people think outside of the Netherlands. But yeah, no, they have some very good players, and it's still popular now. So is speed skating and long distance ice skating. The speed skating and at the Winter Olympics, the Dutch are very good at ice skating when it comes to the speed skating and long distance speed skating. They are very, very good at that as well. Ironically, they're really good at winter sports. Weird. Now, the Dutch, do the Dutch have players from the Dutch? I would assume that, yes. I would assume that they would have players from Curaçao and Aruba, yes. I wouldn't be surprised if, although they're classed as separate nations, the Dutch West Indies, the Aruba, and I think is it Curaçao? They're actually classed as constitutional nations within the United Kingdom of the Netherlands, very similar to us with the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man. And of course, England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. They're classed as constitutional or constituent nations that are under the United Kingdom of the Netherlands. It's like Denmark with Greenland, for example, and the Faroe Islands. But they are classed as separate countries, and they've subdivided the Dutch West Indies a lot over recent years. But they are actually classed as independent nations. Now, whether they actually come under the West Indies for Test cricket, or they come under the Netherlands for T20 and one-day international cricket, I don't know. But I would assume they would definitely play the sport. That's an interesting one. I haven't really thought about that. I'll have to have a look. I'll have to look into that. I think they do have, yeah. I don't know how their passports and because they don't use the euro. They use, I think they still use the guilder or a type of dollar or guilder. They don't use the euro out there. But then Suriname is now a free independent country that's a republic in South America. whereas French Guiana next door is still technically a département of France, ironically. That's an interesting one. It wasn't where we're going to get like political geography. That's these live streams we always go off tangent, don't we? Always go off on a weird tangent. I don't know how the internal mechanisms of the Kingdom of the Netherlands work. I honestly don't know enough about the Netherlands and its internal politics, and how the constitutional countries that make up the United Kingdom of the Netherlands, because that's the official term. It's like the Netherlands is like Great Britain. We're called the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The Netherlands is like the United Kingdom of the Netherlands. And as far as I'm aware, the Dutch West Indies, or what was the Dutch West Indies, which are now Saint Martin, Aruba, and is it Caracal? I think is how you is it Caracal? I think that's how you pronounce it. I think they're three separate kind of. I think they could class them as overseas territories like the British Virgin Islands. Suriname could have had a seriously good football team in the late. Actually, then Suriname are doing quite well now in qualifying for the World Cup. They have the potential to make the World Cup. So let's not. Suriname could have had a very, very good team in the 90s and the 2000s as well. But they're doing quite well in qualifying. So let's hold our horses. They might actually qualify for the World Cup. I think they've got a playoff against. They got a playoff. They got a playoff against someone. I think they got a. Is it a playoff against? Is it Bolivia? It's someone. It's someone really. They do have a World Cup playoff, two-legged playoff, and then they qualify or not. But they've got some good players, yes. But yeah, if I don't know if Suriname was independent in the 80s, might have been. Was it early 80s? I can't remember. But yeah, that'd be interesting if they do qualify, because that would be one of the smaller nations to qualify for a World Cup for population size. I think the smallest nation is Iceland. When it comes to population of nations that qualify, I think that'd be the second smallest nation to qualify for a World Cup via population size, because they're less than 1 million people. I think it's like 600,000, 800,000 people, something like that, live in Suriname. It's not a lot of people. It's more people live in Birmingham in the West Midlands than in Suriname. But yeah, the fact that obviously at the time a lot of the players who could have played decided to play for the Netherlands, speaks volumes about where the sport was there and where it is now. But again, there is this debate about international selection. There is that debate about national selection and could we call it the abuse of the selection policies and how certain nations sort of it's international selection and how is it by residency, the grandparent rule, or the parent rule, or nation of birth? I mean, remember Aaron Birchall used to play for Port Vale, ended up playing for Trinidad and Tobago, not because he was from Trinidad and Tobago, it's just his parents were, I think they were on their honeymoon or something, and his mum was heavily pregnant, and he had to be born there prematurely. So that's why he played for Trinidad and Tobago. Sometimes it's nation of birth, parentage, grandparent rule, residency, and it is becoming. I think as time goes on, it will become less, maybe even more complex, because the way globalization and how people emigrate, move, and it's an interesting one. I think several major sports at international level are now in this conundrum about whether how the international selection criteria work, and there's been a lot of criticism of the international selection policies. Rugby union, rugby league, for example, are always debating points. Cricket's another one. We've seen it in football before. We've seen it in ice hockey, ironically. The Pellini brothers. Now, this is very interesting. The Pellinis, one plays for Canada, one plays for the UK. They were both born in Guildford. Their dads came over here to play in the early 90s for the Guildford Flames. Both were born literally down the road from where I live. And I think the older brother plays for Great Britain, and the younger brother, or played, and the younger brother played for Canada when it came to international representation. And they actually ironically played against each other in a international match, which I thought was kind of interesting. Yeah, well, the Polish one is obviously more historical with the changes of borders and intermarriage and a lot of intermarriage, especially in East Germany between Polish and German parents during communism and the Cold War. And there were a lot of Polish who obviously ended up in Western Europe during World War II, and then they settled in various countries. And that's a complex one. Yes, you've got Lucas Podolski and Miroslav Klose, who have somewhat Polish heritage. And then you've got those like Mesut Ozil. Yes, there is that debate in German football. In Austrian football, we've seen Vlasic and Arnautovic of Balkan heritage, for example, represent Austria. Zlatan Ibrahimovic, for example, representing Sweden, even though he's of Bosnian heritage. Asmir Begovic, born in Canada, in Toronto, represents Bosnia. So we've seen it. Obviously, very, very recently in recent years. And so, yeah, it's a complex one, but the Turkish heritage one, for example, Muzzy Izzet is a famous example here in the UK. Born here. Obviously, a Leicester City legend, played for Turkey in the 2002 World Cup, and had a fantastic tournament, but was obviously very fondly remembered. I've done a video on Muzzy Izzet, for example. Ryan Giggs could play for England, play for Wales. There you go. Kevin Kilban, born in Preston, played for Ireland. Yes, that's going to be an interesting one in years to come with what's happening now and when we go down the line in 20, 30 years' time, maybe even sooner than that, there will be that debate across European football. There is going to be no doubt on that. And it will be a very interesting. But this is something that FIFA and UEFA and the domestic FAs, and it's like Paddy Cash, for example. Is it Paddy Cash? Is it Cash who plays for Poland? What's his first name? Cash plays for Poland. His mum's Polish. But yeah, I mean, look, I think if we look at the US, for example, a lot of their players, because their could play for Germany, because they've got one or both parents were out in Germany, in the military, and they were born out. I mean, I could have, in theory, if I was registered a day later or a couple of days later, I would have been a German citizen and therefore would have had to do compulsory military service. So a lot of Americans and Canadians and Brits, like Hargreaves, for example, born in Germany, could have represented Germany. I'm not joking. It's the same in Italy as well. Giuseppe Rossi, remember him? Could have represented the US. There's a lot of American personnel out in Italy, military personnel. Same here in the UK. There's a lot of military personnel, especially in Norfolk, Suffolk, and Lincolnshire with the air bases. And so there is the potential for players who sound American, talk American, raised in the US, who were born here or in Italy or in Germany, ultimately could play for insert home nation, insert Italy, insert Germany, Turkey, Poland, whatever it is, because they were born on a military base and registered at the registrar's office at a certain time. And there you go. There you go. The Aaron Birchall rule, as I shall call it, because he was born in Trinidad, whilst his parents were on honeymoon. But yeah, this is something that the sports, all the international sports, when it comes to international level, they need to look at. There's been a big debate around it, and there is no perfect solution. There is no perfect solution into international selection. I think the grandparent rule, I think, has worked quite well. So you can represent your heritage going back 2 generations. The residency rule gets abused, and we know that. I mean, Diego Costa obviously famously played for Brazil before playing for Spain, and a few other Brazilian players have, sort of, of all nations have abused that kind of system in that regard. Then there's the country of birth, even if you're not a citizen of that country, like the Aaron Birchall. Yeah, well, they've realised the Pacific nations draw big TV audiences and are everyone's second favourite kind of underdog when it comes to Test matches. Same with rugby league as well. And we have seen a lot in the women's game. We've seen a lot of players who represented other countries swapping allegiance, especially around the home nations. But there's I think you've got to have a 3-year gap or something. There's so many years you've got to not be selected by the nation you used to play for before you can play for another nation. And I do fear, Paul Willemse, for example, has retired today because of concussion. Now, obviously, he could have waited 3 years and played for South Africa. Now, that's obviously not going to happen because he's retired. But let's say South Africa had a crisis in the second row or the back row, and they needed a player quickly. Hey, Paul, do you mind playing for us? We need a second row for a test match. This is a risk a lot of these tier 2 and tier 3 nations are taking, trying to encourage their players to play for them. Is you've got to wait a period of time between the last test they play for the nation that they've decided to play for through residency, parentage, birth, whatever it may be, even though they are also eligible for them, is retirement, injury comes into play, and then they don't get that opportunity. So Paul Willemse, for example, who's just retired, doesn't get that opportunity to play for South Africa. Same as Scott Spedding doesn't get that opportunity to play for South Africa because he's now retired. I think Rory Kokot is another one who I think could have played for South Africa. So there is this, it's not just the Pacific nations, it's all nations. There is this risk attached. I'm just using them as examples off the top of my head because they're players that I know could represent South Africa. But Mike Catt, for example, represented England, born in South Africa, and that again was a famous one, very famous one. There's quite a few players who, Liner, his son represents Italy because his mum's Italian. Now, he could represent Australia, he could also represent England as well through his grandparents. And so, great, there's a few. There's so many in a lot of sports. Now, we've seen it in the Women's World Cup, we've seen it in the men's as well. I think World Rugby have realised, and I think they've realised a bit too late, that there was a lot of criticism being thrown at them because the Tier 2 and Tier 3 nations were being pillaged by Tier 1 nations of their best players. And England are guilty of this, Scotland are guilty of this, Ireland, Wales, France, Italy, not South Africa, actually no, South Africa with Namibia and Zimbabwe have pillaged players over the years who could have gone on to play for Namibia and Zimbabwe. Australia, New Zealand, they've been doing it for donkeys. Even the US and Canada have done it. And I think that has hindered the competitive nature of these nations, the growth. at the Test level, and is a bad image when, if this was association football, that wouldn't happen. But it's been allowed to happen in both codes of rugby for a very, very long time. And the pushback has been there, and a lot of the fans were like, "Hey, come on, we need to see these Fijians, these Tongans, these Samoans, rugby league with the Cook Islands, for example." The Argentinians had it with Italy. Uruguay's had it with Argentina going, your dad's from, we'll have you. Even the Argentinians have been doing it. This has been going on a long time. Now the Lions are saying if you're a foreign-born player, you can't play for the Lions. What happens if you've got parents who are British but you're brought up in South Africa, and then you come back to the UK or Ireland? We're starting to go down. No, it's for all nations. If you haven't played Test rugby, I don't know how long. I think it's 3 years. You become eligible for the nation of your birth, heritage, or the or residency. You can swap nations. I think there has to be a time gap though between the last time you're selected for one nation and then the time you can represent another. I think it covers all nations because Spain's been pillaged by France. Georgia's been pillaged by France. Yashvili, his brother played for Georgia. He played for France. Obviously, he's now retired. A few Spanish players played for France. Italy, they've had Kiwis, Australians, Africans. I think they've had a couple of Fijians as well under residency. All the home nations have done it. Argentina have done it with Uruguayans. Italy have done it with Argentinians when Argentina was struggling to get into the rugby championship. Some Argentinians with Italian heritage, but we'll go over to Europe. Yeah, they can do a Diego Costa. Absolutely, yeah. They can do a Diego Costa. But World Rugby was facing a lot of pushback because the Pacific Islanders especially were being pillaged by Australia and New Zealand. But South Africa's done it with Zimbabwe and Namibia for a long time, since the 90s, when Namibia gained independence, and Zimbabwe obviously had their issues with the political instability in the 90s and the 2000s. South Africa, the South Africans have done it. But yeah, we're now starting to see that a lot of the Pacific Island lads and some of the Aussie lads as well, some of the Aussie lads are choosing the home nations in rugby league. And a lot of the Pacific Island lads are now choosing to not play for New Zealand or Australia, but play for their Pacific Island heritage. And there's been a big debate around state of origin in the rugby league world, and with the women's international at the beginning of the season with England, Australia, where Australia pummeled England. 7 NRLW players were like, I've either got a mum or a dad or both grandparents or all grandparents. I can play for England. And the England coaching setup stupidly went, no, we're good. 7 players put their hands up and said, under selection rules, under International Rugby League rules, I've got a parent or a grandparent or both or birth, because they've obviously emigrated as young kids. We can play. We're happy to go to Vegas and play. And the England coaching setup said no. And then the rest is history, with a thumping, record-breaking win by the Aussie women over the England women, which was embarrassing and damaged the image of the women's game. And so rugby league does it. Obviously, rugby union's doing it because rugby league's doing it. Cricket's been doing it for a long time, where there's pillaging of players, and there's a big debate around that. So ice hockey, it doesn't matter. The Diego Costa side of things is the resonance. That's where it gets. Is it Eduardo played for Croatia? He used to play for Arsenal, shattered his leg horribly. There are several. Was it Peter Odemwingie? Could have done it and could have played for Russia, but he decided to play for Nigeria because he's half and half. I think the debate's there. We've seen youth players play for one country and then swap and play. It's like Laporte. He's a French Basque, but he plays for Spain because he played for Bilbao, but he's a French Basque. And I had this argument with some div on in the comment section, and I was like, no, in order to, it just got stupid. I had to basically explain Basque nationalism to someone, which was really interesting because they were absolutely clueless, and they were trying to tell me that I was clueless, and it was hilarious. The best argument I've had is I had to explain sectarianism in Scottish football and Irish football to a Tottenham fan that I used to work with, and he was absolutely like, "What is going on?" And I was like, "Because where I was working before on the bins, the driver we had was a diehard, and I mean diehard Protestant Rangers, Orange Order, really sectarian, and we were outside a Catholic church, and he got the CD out and he whacked it in the stereo, and I was like, "Get out this truck now!" And there was a service going on. It was a midday mass, and I just went, "Oh my god, this is just." And this young lad who I was working with, was a few years younger than me, just looked at me, why are you like worried? And I was like, well, my dad did 3 tours in Northern Ireland, did 6 tours in Northern Ireland during the height of the Troubles. I'm like, oh shit. And I've got Catholic and Protestant heritage on both the English side of my family and the Irish side of my family, historically, going way back. And I've done all my family history and shit. And I was just like, I was head in hands, man, going, Christ. And I had to explain this because we passed the church, and then there was this house that had a Celtic flag out the front. I thought, oh Christ! Bear in mind, we're in the South of England, and he did the thing again. And then we got a bit further along, and there was a Hibs fan. I was, oh Christ! Because there's obviously a lot of Scots have moved down from Scotland and are living in England for work. And with that, you get Hibs, Hearts, Rangers, Celtic, Aberdeen, Motherwell, Partick. You throw all the Scottish clubs. And outside the Hibs house, he plays it again. And at this point, I had to explain sectarianism. That just, he just didn't quite understand. Like I said, I said, do you remember the he doesn't. I said he was actually too young to actually remember the Good Friday Agreement. I had to explain that. And I had to explain 1968 to 1998, and then I had to explain 1919 plus the Easter Rising, and then I had to explain all the. It just was long. It was long, and I just then I had to go back even further to the Battle of the Boyne and the siege of Londonderry and Enniskillen, and I was just, oh god. And then I put it into a footballing context, and he was like, "So that's why Rangers and Celtic and Hibs and Hearts don't like each other." And I was like, "Yes," and I was like, "Yes," and then it clicked. He was like, "Oh," I was like, "Oh Christ." How long till they relax the rules in football? I don't know how long until those rules get relaxed, but players still do a Diego Costa even now. They still do it even now. Many players have done it. How good England could be if they had the rugby eligibility style rules? We're pretty good now, so we nick the best Irish players. Grealish and Declan Rice should be playing for Ireland, but they're playing for England even though they played youth level for Ireland. Let that sink in. And we got very lucky that Wayne Rooney decided not to play for Scotland or Ireland as well, and he decided to play for England. So we already, it happens now. But at the same time, look how many players we've lost to Caribbean nations and African nations who born and raised here. Wilfred Zaha, there's an example. Ricardo Gardner played for Jamaica. There you go. Bolton legend. Actually, could have also played for England. Catalonia, yeah, would have a scary team, as would the Basques. If the Basque Country in Spain got independence and France, that would be a pretty stacked team as well. You have no idea how many great Spanish and French players are from the Basque Country historically. What Haaland? I mean, we'll see if in the future Norway can get back to an international tournament, which obviously hasn't happened since. I'm trying to remember, is it World Cup 94 or World Cup 98 is the last time Norway appeared at an international senior men's tournament? Definitely in the 90s. I'm going to have to check. I wouldn't say he's a what if. He's proven it now at club level, and he's still scoring goals at international level. I think the problem Norway has at the moment is in the 90s they had a fantastic side. All the Scandinavian nations in the 90s, for some reason, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, all at the same time, were all really, really good and had a crop, like a massive generation of players that all came through at the same time. And a lot of them were household names in Sweden, in Norway, in Denmark, and then globally. They just all, in the 80s and 90s, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, all at the same time, just had world-class players. And Norway's drop-off in comparison to Sweden and Denmark, who regularly get tournaments, Norway don't. There's the difference, is Sweden and Denmark continue more regularly to produce top quality. What if you chose England over Norway? Well, look, that is an interesting debate. Same with Kasper Schmeichel. He obviously chose Denmark over England because he also could have played for England. He chose Denmark. These are big what ifs. Yes, there are some. Perotta, who played for Italy, actually could have represented England at the 2006 World Cup. Muzzy Izzet's another one who ended up playing for Turkey. So there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them who, played their youth football here, or were born here, or played their entire careers in this country. Kazim Richards, there you go, another one. Never played in Turkey, but played for Turkey. They're Wilfred Zaha. There's a lot. There is a lot. I think we were fortunate that we got John Barnes playing for us rather than Jamaica. So one of the most underrated wingers, in my opinion. And I got to see him play actually at Anfield, and I had the pleasure of meeting him. John Barnes is, in my opinion, one of the nicest guys ever. Fantastic. But I do mean this. I think when people say, well, there aren't many good strikers, I think at the moment, the quality of strikers across the board is a lot lower than what it was in the 90s. And not just in the Premier League, but across the board. The level of the style of play has changed in a bad way, where the Guardiola pass it around, ticky-tacky, the false nine. In my opinion, and this is my, I don't think football is as good now as what it was at the top level 20, 25 years ago. You look at the amount of strike. You don't get your Darren Huckabees playing for Coventry City anymore, who could slot into any, or your Marcus Stewarts, or your Phillips, who played for Sunderland. You're not getting these players playing for mid-table clubs anymore. Who obviously you're not getting them. You're not. No, it's not just England. It's across the board. It's the same. It's across the board. You're getting there are less top quality strikers across the board because of the style of play that's being implemented, where copycat coaches, where they all were trying to now play from the back with the goalkeeper, and they're all, apart from Crystal Palace and Atalanta, as two standout teams that play a high press counter attack, just everything done quickly. Like this slow, slit your wrist possession based, pass it around, win 1-0. I can't think of many clubs that play that style. Most clubs now are overplaying it, passing out from the back, getting the goalkeeper to be a sweeper at the same time, and most goalkeepers don't want to do that. Ironically, they want to just leather it, but they're being forced to by coaches that are obsessed with, we've all got, because it works for Man City or it worked for Barcelona, we've all got to play this way. No, you don't. What was brilliant about the football in the 90s and the early 2000s is there was about 80 or 90 different ways to play. Every coach was unique. Every club had its own unique style. And now it's just cookie cutter crap. And I don't think Kane's actually as good as many people make out that he is. I don't think Kane would have been able to lace the boots of the strikers in the 90s, personally. I don't know. I think now, I think the quality of strikers is a lot lower now than what it was 25 years ago. Across the board. It's not just for England, but across the board. Too many coaches doing this cookie cutter approach, and it just doesn't work. Does not work. You don't get your Inzagis that are just literally just snipers in the box. You don't get your Hasselbanks and Bergkamps that can also play like an attacking midfield role and drop a little bit deeper and physical. And Bergkamp was ridiculous. You're not getting your Kevin Phillips, that's his name. You're not getting your Kevin Phillips. You're not getting your Jermaine Defoe's. You're not getting your Oliver Bierhoffs. He was beast. Very, very physical, muscular centre forward. You're not getting your Miroslav Kloses, pure poachers. You're not getting the old Gerd Muller of the back in the day. You're not getting your Greaves and Hurst type players. Who could also run, or your Michael Owens, who could not just be poachers in the box, but also go on long, mazy runs and use their pace and actually just run at defenders, because it's this possession passing based game where it's all going to be 1-2 touch, pass it around, no intensity, no pace to the passing. It's just possession for possession's sake. The shooting accuracy now is woeful. You look at the shooting accuracy week in, week out, it's woeful. It's gone downhill. It's shocking. The shooting accuracy is absolutely shocking. And these guys are getting paid 80, 90, 100 grand a week, and they can't hit a barn door. I'm sorry. The stats speak for themselves. Haaland, while he scores a lot of goals, my God, he misses some just tap-ins. He's got to tap it in. That's all he's got to do. Some of the opportunities Haaland misses are ridiculous. Oh my God. And then you've got players like Sterling. Oh my God. The amount of times he just gives the ball away aimlessly and he can't hit a barn door. He would have not even made League One in, or what was the old Division 2 back in the 90s. He would not be at that level because his end product's crap. Like, Harry Kane's got no movement, honestly. Sometimes his movement is that of a bloody, of an oak tree in a storm where it just creaks a little bit. He's very wooden. He's a big bloke. Use that physicality. Okay, you've lost a yard of pace or half a yard of pace. Use your positional sense and physicality. Bully the centre back. Bully the defensive midfielder. Hold the ball up. Have a strike partner. The way football is played now is crap. It's crap. I'm not even kidding. It is absolutely diabolical. And the way I would describe it is, if you want to see some of the best games ever played, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to be quite honest about this, the 1970 group stage game between England and Brazil is voted more often than not the greatest game of all time. And yes, we're going back to 1970, and all the players are probably chain smoking pissheads, and probably not the fittest. Right? They're playing in the heat and altitude in Mexico. In the heat of the day, it's 1-0. Yet the goal that wins the game by Jairzinho is brilliant. And the interplay between England and Brazil, I mean, don't get me, I mean, both sides played 90 minutes in ridiculous heat at altitude, and it's a fantastic game. And I suggest anyone who claims they know anything about football watch that game in full, because it's on the internet. It is on the internet. It's on YouTube in colour. And then watch, I don't know, pick a game, any game. Last year's FA Cup final. I know Palace did a smash and grab, but it's the best smash and grab ever, and I actually enjoyed it. Pick the League Cup final, which Newcastle beat Liverpool. Just a final. Doesn't matter if it's club, international, and pick it. I would also argue in that same World Cup, with extra time, one of the greatest games of all time is the semi-final between West Germany and Italy, where it is 1-1 after 90 minutes. Most of the action happens in extra time. It is ridiculous. Beckenbauer plays the majority of the game with a dislocated shoulder and broken collarbone, which is also popping out, and plays most of the game with his arm hanging about because it's fucked. And that finished 4-3 to Italy. Two of the best games of all time in the 1970 World Cup. Compare it to the crap we have now, and then come back to me. Honestly, the 1986 semi-final between West Germany and France, or Belgium and Argentina. Again, watch them and then come back to me. Honestly. Or how Denmark completely annihilate Uruguay in 1986. That's one of the best team performances you'll ever see. Absolutely ever see. Any game from Italia 90. Gaz's Tiz, any game from Italia 90. I mean, England-Holland Euro 96 is possibly one of the fondest memories I have as a kid growing up watching the game. England-Scotland Euro 96. You watch that and you compare that to the England-Scotland game at that recent Euros when it was during COVID. Honestly, and you tell me which is the better game. I think Euro 96 will win. World Cup 98. Oh my God. The England-Argentina game. While we might have lost that game. Or Argentina-Holland at World Cup 98. Just Bergkamp's goal. He makes Ayala, who's one of the best defenders in the 90s, look like a clown. And De Boer's, is it a 70-yard diagonal? I can't remember which De Boer brother it is, but he pings it and Bergkamp's control. Bearing in mind, Bergkamp has got no left foot. He makes Ayala just look like a clown and puts it past Rower in like 3 touches. You don't get that today. You don't get that today. I mean, you've got just some ridiculous. I think it's around 2008, 2010 with the tiki taka where it just football changes and it kills it. Absolutely kills it. You don't get goals like Van Basten's in '88 in today's game. You don't get that. Van Basten's ridiculous volley against the Soviet Union in the final in 1988 is ridiculous. And that was a stacked Soviet Union side with some fantastic players. You do not get Van Basten's 88 goal in today's game. You don't. You know, 86, the Soviet Union playing Hungary, and Vasily Rat pile drives one in from about 35, 40 yards, and it's ridiculous. And when I say ridiculous, he almost knocks the referee out. The referee has to jump out the way of this rocket. And this is before my time. I've got all this on DVD and video. I mean, these are all on YouTube, all these goals. There's a channel that does all the World Cup goals and all the Euros goals and Copa America goals in history. And some of the goals in '86 are ridiculous. It's like Falcao for Brazil against Italy in '82, where he beats Dino Zoff and he just drills it and he ties the game at 2-2. And this is the days of samba football when Brazil would implode. You wouldn't get the Cruyff in '74. I mean, like, just total football, proper when they actually got it right. It's something to behold. Ari Hahn with his goal against West Germany and then his goal against Italy in the which are carbon copy goals in '78. You don't get them today. And that's against the great Dino Zoff. Possibly one of the greatest goalkeepers of all time, who only missed, I think he only missed like 10 games for Juventus in his entire career. And I have a program somewhere where the backup goalkeeper played 7 times in 10 years. Oh, yeah, you mean when they thought the Swiss would be crap and then Dirdiok scores the winner by bundling it in the ugliest goal past Iker Casillas at 2010. And it showed that tiki-taka works to a point. But then if you've got a 4-3-3 and a disciplined team, it doesn't work. Because the tiki-taka works for the high press, but then you've got a 4-3-3 ball over the top and they can't defend it. As Man City find out constantly, ball over the top. Wide players willing to run and a centre forward willing to bully the centre backs, because the centre backs are skillful players and don't like being touched because they will fall over. And whinge at the ref because then, tiki-taka is a flawed system, like total football. It just won more trophies than total football. Total football worked for about 4 years, 4 or 5 years between 1968 and 1973. And then was exposed in 1974 by the West Germans in the final. And the Brazilians who played samba football. Now, the 74 semi-final between the Netherlands and Brazil is one of the dirtiest games of all time. And you've got the Brazilians who've won 3 out of the last 4 World Cups. The reason why they didn't win in '66 is Portugal went, they got Pele. We can't win if he's playing his best. Let's break his leg. Basically, the Portuguese were like, in order to win this game, we've got to take out their number 10, their fulcrum, that key component as a link between the defensive midfield and attack. Let's take Pele out of the game. They took him, they kicked him out of the game. They literally assaulted him to the point where he's hacked out of the game. Brazil don't win 4 in a row. They win 3 out of 4 because Pele was taken out of the game. Pele has retired by 1974, even though he can still play. He's retired from international football. He's not playing anymore. But they've still got Rivellino, who was a fantastic player, by the way, with his mullet and mustache, his porn star mustache. And the Brazilians realised Cruyff. In fact, the Dutch midfield, Ari Hahn, De Jong, Cruyff, they're like, Christ, not only have they got Cruyff, who is potentially the greatest player of all time, but they've got half the Ajax team and half the Feyenoord team, and they're like, oh shit, Christ. And they'd obviously done their homework. They'd watched the Dutch play, and the Dutch had watched the Brazilians play for 10, 15, 16 years. And the two most exciting styles of play come up against each other. But what people don't realise about total football and what people don't realise about Samba football is it was also exceptionally cynical and dirty. And yeah, they liked kicking the shit out of each other. And for 90 minutes, that was one of the dirtiest games ever played. On a level like the Battle of Santiago in '62, which was obviously played in Chile. Between Chile and Italy, where players, I think there was broken jaws and police got involved and broken legs, and it was a nasty game. This is on that kind of level of not like the World Cup final in 2010. There are some of the tackles that go in are absolutely vile. And there's a very famous bit where Rivellino is waiting for the ball, and I believe it's I think it's De Jong or Neeskins, literally lines up, comes up to Rivellino, and he's not looking at him, and he just elbows him in the side of the head, fractures his eye socket, and then hops away. Didn't do it, ref. And then there's some waist high challenges and stamps and punches and eye gouging. Just watch the 74 semi-final, and then Cruyff just does Cruyff things. But what is potentially one of the dirtiest games ever played. And both sides realised in order to win, they had to kick the other side off the field because both sides were equally skilled in attack. But in order to win, they had to injure their best players. And Brazil realised this, and Holland realised this, and they went, okay, we'll just kick the shit out of each other for 90 minutes, and Holland happened to win. That's why Holland make the final. That's why the Dutch make the final, should I say. Holland's a region, should be the Netherlands. But that's why Cruyff and the Dutch make the final and Brazil and Rivellino don't. Is they literally spent 90 minutes assaulting each other. It just so happened the Dutch scored some goals. Oh no, you couldn't get away with it. VAR, but red card. The referee would be abandoning the game after 20 minutes. But that's how the game was played back then. But at the same time as that being one of the dirtiest games, some of the skill on display was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And then you had the 2010 final where De Jong on Alonso. I mean, how the hell he didn't go to prison? Could have killed him. I remember watching. I was at a house party watching that with my mate's 18th, and I was on the source. I remember watching that. And then I've seen some horrendous games, horrendous in the lower leagues where it's just pure on violence. And players like Vinnie Jones admit they would have to alter how they play today. Look, it wasn't a good advert for referees in general, but English referees. And a lot of people say it's a shame Kalina had retired by that point, but I have to agree. He had a shocking game. How De Jong stayed on the field is beyond me. But how some of the Spanish players stayed on how both sides finished with more than 8 players. There should have been 4 or 5 red cards per team. The Spanish were just as bad as the Dutch, with a little bit more skill. That's it. When the Spanish had some dirty players. When you've got Puyol and Ramos as your 2 centre backs, there's going to be some fouls. Let's not kid ourselves. I think both sides played into that by very early on. They realised Howard Webb was not getting on top of it, and both sides decided to kick lumps out of each other. It just so happened Spain won. That's it. It just happened. Spain won 1-0. Oh, look, again, this is again in hindsight, and looking back at it, I'm surprised that the game ended with was a player sent off in that game, or did it end up with 11 players? Was anyone sent off? I can't remember if anyone got sent off in that final. But look, how bearing in mind, 2006, Zidane gets sent for the headbutt, right? And that wasn't a violent game. But 2010 as a World Cup wasn't a great World Cup. If I'm being honest, it was a poor World Cup. Heitinger. God, he was an average player, wasn't he? He was an average player, wasn't he, for international level? He was an average player. Better than a lot of players, but an average player. At the end of the day, the fact it got to that stage where only one player got sent off in that game is, I think that was that Howard Webb's last game as well, and now he's in charge of the PGMOL, and we're having all the carnage around VAR and poor refereeing performances. Yeah, interesting the appointment he has now, but no, how only one player got that was one of the, but even that doesn't compare to the 74 semi-final or the 62 Battle of Santiago. It pales into comparison. Absolutely pales in comparison with games in the past. But that was but the 2010 World Cup was not a great World Cup. It's my least favourite that I've watched. And I was a kid during USA 94. I don't remember a lot of it, but that was. Oh, did he? Okay, how? I think Howard Webb in 2010, not a good look. And now he's in charge of all the Premier League referees now and the Football League referees now with the PGMOL. And he's constantly under pressure to explain why the standard is so poor and mistakes are still being made with VAR and how the implementation's a mess and the remit is the whole thing's a mess. The whole thing is an absolute shower. I'm sorry. There's no other way. It's an absolute shower. I'm telling you. I'm disappointed, but I don't enjoy football anymore. At least at the elite level. I mean, I will watch the early rounds of the FA Cup and really enjoy watching lower league football and non-league football. Don't get me wrong. I think cup competitions are a great leveler. The FA Cup, first round, second round, third round. There's magic there still a little bit. But even at the lower levels now, it's becoming a bit, in my opinion, it's starting to become sterile. And I think the quality we're watching is not on the same level as what we were watching 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And I always say this to fans of the game now, all those, especially from North America, who just got into the game, especially from the US and Canada. I always tell them certain games to watch from the past, and that would be the 1970 game between Brazil and England, the 1970 semi-final between West Germany and Italy. Some of the games in like 86 and 78 and 82 and Italia 90, Euro 96, World Cup 98. Some of the FA Cup replay between in semi-final in 99 between Manchester United and Arsenal. Some of the games from years past, and then compare it to now, and you tell me, Messi and Ronaldo would not have won as many Ballon d'Ors as they have done if they were playing 20 years earlier. And that's my personal opinion, and people can disagree with that. But they're playing in an era where the quality we're watching is not as good as what went before. And I stand by that statement. I don't care how many Messi fanboys and Ronaldo fanboys are in the comment section of any video I do, or end up watching this live stream years down the line. I will stand by that statement. I don't think Ronaldo and Messi, have as long as careers as they do, because back in the day, they would have been hacked to pieces. And early in their careers, they were getting chopped down a lot. But I tell you now, I don't think they would have made it past 30. Honestly, I think Ronaldo especially would have been his career would have ended sooner than Messi's. I think Messi plays the game, I think, in a better way. Is more of a team player than Ronaldo. Less of an ego, less of an attitude, less disrespect. I think Messi's more of a respectful player. And I think Messi's a better all-round player. But again, if they're playing 20 years earlier, I don't think their careers are as long, and I don't think they win as many Ballon d'Ors because it was a more cutthroat. It just different game. I think referees have protected them for a long time, and the quality is just not as good. I think players are overcoached in attack and defence. I think the flair is gone from the game. We've now got showboating rather than actual flair to use the skill for positive. You've got players like Neymar who showboat and disrespect the opposition in a negative way, rather than use their skill to get out of tight situations and bring teammates into play. Quick bit of skill, get it moved. The Cruyff turn, for example, in '74, when Cruyff does that was done to beat the defender, not to showboat and disrespect the defender. Is to get around the player, to get the cross in, to create. He used that skill in order to further the attack that the Dutch were on at the time. And he didn't use it all the time. The Cruyff turn was done when the defender has got him on his weaker foot, and therefore he's going to be not giving the better cross into the box or the better pass, and he does it to get back on his stronger foot to then give a better pass to the supporting player in the attack to continue the attack. That's why the Cruyff turn is a thing. When you've got players like Neymar showboating with their skill, deliberately doing it to disrespect and denigrate and insult the opposition, rather than using it like the Cruyff turn, as I use that as an example, or just Ronaldinho, just some of his skill was because he played for the love of the game. You can see he's playing with joy on his face. And players like Maradona, Bergkamp with his first touch, and using it to use his skill to basically position to get the defender out of the way. That goal he scores against Newcastle, where he takes 3 defenders out of play by one touch of the ball, that's the proper use of skill and technique and first touch. One of the greatest Premier League goals of all time is Dennis Bergkamp against Newcastle. I'm sorry. That is, in my opinion, when skill is useful. All those skills you use on the training ground and in the back garden and on the street with your mates, mucking about doing key, that's when you want to have skill being used in the right way. And he's doing something so ridiculous off the cuff. We don't get that now. We do not get that now, where that flair has gone out the game. The flair has gone out the game. The raking long passes are done less frequently now. So your Paul Scholes, your DeBose, your Beckhams, you could rake a pass 50, 60, 70 yards, and there you go. That's gone out the game. It just doesn't exist. Well, it does, but it's not on the same level. And now with the introduction of the VAR and the goal line tech and semi-automated offsides, and we can debate the pros and cons of assisting the 5 substitutions. Who needs 5 substitutions? Crikey, when I was a kid, I think it was still 2 subs was the thing when I first started watching. And then it became 3. And now it's become 5 with a 6th with extra time. And I'm thinking, really? Do we really need 5 substitutions in 90 minutes? Do we really need that? I think the game has gone down a route where it's Chris Wilder has been announced. Yeah, well, that was expected. They already basically hinted at that when they sacked Ruben Selles. So that doesn't surprise me. It was already basically, the secret was out last night. It's amazing that they didn't come to terms at the end of last season and keep him on, and he decided not to stay. But what I find interesting is his contract is shorter than what they get Ruben Sellers. He's done for 2 years. Ruben Sellers was in for 3. But Sheffield United, I mean, it's Chris Wilder again. Yeah, it's the Chris Wilder show. Yeah. I mean, is he going to leave again and then come back a 4th time? I don't understand why he didn't stick around after the playoff final and go, you know what, let's build again. Let's go again. Here's where we went wrong. This is where we can improve. Let's go again. Because it's hurt Sheffield United start the season. They could miss playoffs because of it. They could still be struggling, come the next international break or the opening of the transfer window. Just because he's had success there before and had a good record there before doesn't mean it's going to work again. But that was sort of as soon as Sellers was sacked, it was like Chris Wilder was going to be announced soon. It was already known. But you've got to ask questions of the appointment, the due diligence, why after just 6 competitive matches was the decision taken to move on? Could he have turned things around? Was there reports from the players that this isn't working? It's the same with Ten Hag. I mean, I've now seen a lot of what was reported and what's been discussed about why Ten Hag was gone so quickly. And it's the same with Nuno at Nottingham Forest. I mean, there's going to be some more sackings, and I think sooner rather than later. I think West Ham, Man United, Rangers, I think they're the 3 clubs at the moment to watch. I can see Ruben Amorim not seeing out the season. I can see Graham Potter not getting to the next international break. And Rangers, oh my God, they've not been this bad since the 70s. So, there are 3 big clubs, I think, that watch this space when it comes to who's going to be the manager from one week to the next. Yeah, the weather has changed. It's been really weird. I mean, we've obviously been under the weather warning down here in the south. I mean, it was. I don't know how bad it was overnight because this is one of the first nights I've actually had my window shut. I've basically had my window open when I'm in the flat since, I'm going to say, end of March, beginning of April. I've got it open at the moment just because I had a long walk home from work and it was still quite warm out. It's not freezing cold. It's reasonably warm out. And I was sweating quite a bit, but it was it was on and off rain on the way home, but it was still quite warm. And I'm probably going to shut the window in a bit. But the last few days on my week off last week, I wasn't opening the window as much. The weather has been changeable. That is very noticeable, yes. We've got this weather warning. I think it's still in place till, I don't know how long it's going to last, this weather warning, actually. That's something we're going to have to check. Bear with me. Yeah, I hope there's a changing of things in Scotland, because Celtic and Rangers, I mean, the last team not called Celtic or Rangers to win was Aberdeen back in the mid-80s. So I think Scottish football has been hurt by the old firm. But in the 70s and 80s, Scottish football was really, really competitive. It was really good historically. And I think it has been hurt by the old firm. I think that has definitely hurt Scottish football and made it less attractive for investors. And they're not attracting the players they were in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s north of the border now. And that in itself, they're not developing the players they used to as well. So again, it would be nice to see Hibs. Hibs are doing quite well, as well, and have done in recent seasons. Hibs, Aberdeen, Hearts, yeah, Motherwell, both Dundee clubs. St Johnstone, Kilmarnock. Just throw in Falkirk are in the Scottish Premiership this soon. And are above Rangers. Who knew? It would be nice to see some other clubs competitive and doing it. And it needs someone or some investors to be brave. And instead of looking at English football and the Premier League and Championship and the lower leagues, actually go, let's invest in Scottish football, the SPL and the Scottish Football League, and change the dynamic. Because I do think that if that first investor's brave, like Abramovich was with Chelsea, when that first investor comes along and is willing to, buy a club and invest and spend money, I think Scottish football is going to continue to struggle, because it's not just competitiveness in the SPL. It's youth development, it's grassroots, it's player retention, it's player recruitment, it's a whole facet of things. It's stadium upgrades, it's TV deal, it's sponsorships, it's corporate, it's doing better in Europe. It's a whole range of things, and it needs someone to go, right, I'm going to buy insert club, not called Rangers or Celtic. Let's say Partick. There you go. There's an ironic one. There's another club. Someone buys Partick or buys Motherwell or Inverness or I don't know, Hibs, Hearts, Dumbarton, any club in Scotland. Just a club that isn't Rangers or Celtic. Throw a dartboard, buys them, invests in them, and goes, right, we're gonna. Our goal is to win. And people say, but they bought the league. Well, Celtic and Rangers have bought the league for 40 years. It's hurt Scottish football, I think, quite badly, beyond repair, in my opinion, potentially. And it's going to take someone to come along and go, we need to change this. And soon. Because it just, yeah. Oh, yeah, I mean, look, last week the weather was not the best on my week off, I'm going to be honest. But then again, the furthest I went was the shops, and I was kind of glad just to rest for a week and not worry about going to work and just have a week away from work and do more channel content. I think Friday was the only day last week where I didn't do any content. And to be honest, I wouldn't say I got fatigued, but it was just nice just to have that one day of I'm doing nothing. Friday, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be in bed all day. It was nice. Not a good look when Celtic and Rangers have 50 more league titles than the third best Aberdeen. No, it's not, no. And unfortunately, it's where Scottish football's at. And look, we can. I've done a lot. This is why I decided with leagues, like when I think the reason why I actually started doing the football club history videos, the first one I did was in 2018, was at that point, Bayern Munich were about to play Eintracht Frankfurt in the German Cup on the DFB Pokal, and they lost 3-1. And I was like, you know what? People say the German league is the Bayern Liga. And I think the first club I did a history video on was Borussia Mönchengladbach. And in the 70s, they were the German team to play for. They were star-studded. They were winning everything. And the 70s was their decade of dominance. They won a lot. They didn't win the European Cup, but they won everything else. And there was a discussion in the 70s that Borussia Mönchengladbach was bad for German football because they're winning all the time. And then a few days after I did that video, Eintracht Frankfurt beat Bayern Munich 3-1 in the German cup final. By a certain Glasner in charge. Let that sink in. A certain Austrian who's now manager of Crystal Palace in charge. And the rest is history. And then Bayer Leverkusen did what they did under Xabi Alonso and made history in the process of doing it domestically. And yeah, and that's the reason why I and the old firm in Scotland, they're the couple of, this is before Man City go on their stupid success streak where they basically bought the league, and we all know this. And then I decided, I think, was it 2021 or 2022? I didn't do a club history for a long time. And then I think it was in the hot summer 3 years ago, I went, you know what? Let's have a look at the founding clubs of the Football League, the 12, and the Football Alliance. Let's have a look at some of the oldest clubs in the English game and go from there. And there you go. The rest is history. The rest is history, and went from there. I wouldn't say Bayern Munich strangled German football. They've just been very well run now for a while. And Borussia Dortmund are another club which been quite successful. And then you've got Hamburg. Back in the day, were quite successful. Admittedly, they've struggled in more recent times. Schalke, massive fan base for Schalke. Stuttgart, Eintracht Braunschweig. There you go. One league title, but there you go. And they won their first silverware before Munich did, so there you go. You've got a lot of clubs in German football have got great histories and silverware and success. It just so happens that in the last, I'm going to say 15, 20 years, Munich have been the best run and have won the most silverware. At some point, they're going to stop winning. And, what was if, Bayer Leverkusen start winning again? Or Dortmund, or Hamburg, or Schalke, or Borussia Mönchengladbach, or one of the Berlin clubs, or in Stuttgart. There's a lot of clubs that have had success in Germany, and at some point, your Munichs, your PSGs, they're not going to win anymore. Yeah, the Edinburgh clubs in Aberdeen. Imagine if both the big Edinburgh clubs in Aberdeen all got wealthy investors. Suddenly, the conversation changes. And if Celtic and Rangers continue to have their issues, because Celtic aren't running away with it, because there's a certain Edinburgh club called Hibs doing rather well, who are equal on points, just goal difference. If Brendan Rodgers continues to have, and the fans continue with the unrest at Celtic, the conversation changes. Rangers are in a mess. That's given. Is it Hearts or is it Hibs? It's one of the. But there is a conversation to be had where if Celtic also implode, because they're looking very, very, very likely they could also implode Celtic with what's happening with a lot of fan anger and Brendan Rodgers, even though they won at the weekend under pressure, with some of their performances not being, and they're doing really well in the league. I mean, they're joint top. Goal difference. That's it. Goal difference is the only reason why Celtic are top. But if you look at it, fans aren't happy. And yet, they're top of the league. Yeah, Russell Martin is it's going horrible. It's all gone Pete Tong. But at some point, someone has got to be brave with money and invest in another Scottish club. Even if it's just 1 or 2 league titles that they win in a span, it's just got to stop the Old Firm dominance, because when that happens, other clubs will see hope. Other investors will go, hang on a second, we might suddenly, this league's competitive. Let's give it a crack. And things change. Yeah, that will force the league to improve, because I think otherwise the league is in big, Scottish football's in big trouble. Big trouble. And look, the qualifier I watched the other night, which they won, was it the best Scotland performance I've seen? No. I forget who they were playing now. But you could clearly see that the players are playing for Steve Clark. Well, the Portuguese league, I think 5 clubs in total have won the Portuguese top flight. Boa Vista, I think, are the 4th most successful, and they've got multiple league titles. And then it's, who is it? There's another one. It's going to annoy me now. The 5th club that's won. Is it Academia? I can't remember. You got Braga. No, it's not Braga. Although they have won silverware. It's more the Taca de Portugal. Sporting, Benfica, Porto, Boa Vista, and there's another club that has won the league title. Belenenses, there you go. And I've done videos on Belenenses and Boa Vista. I think I've done one on Porto as well. I think, is it Benfica or Sporting? It's Sporting and Benfica. Right? I've done one on Braga. Yeah, but Boa Vista have won. No, Boa Vista have actually, I think, won more than that. I think Boa Vista have actually, their class is the 4th club over Belenenses. Boa Vista, I think they've won more than that. I think they've got one more league title. They've got more league titles than that, because they've won a lot of silverware. It's going to bug me now because I've done a video on it, and I got a lot of feedback from Portuguese viewers. Yes, I was very popular in Portugal for a while. Yeah, I think it's then the Taca de Portugal then. That's going to annoy me now but they've appeared in the Champions League and stuff, and gone on European runs. But Boa Vista at the moment are so badly run. They owe so much money to so many other people. They're not. Their owner is a bit of a crook at the moment, and that's hurting them. And Belenenses, they're a basket case these days. They're not in the top flight. But yeah, the Portuguese league, only 5 teams have won the title. Yeah. Boa Vista are a basket case. Belenenses are a basket case. Portuguese football is a basket case, to be honest. Portuguese football is a mess. Ironically, the Swiss league is the most competitive for where the titles go and who wins what. And people go, "What, the Swiss league?" That's one of the reasons why I covered the Swiss league in the way I did, and looked at as many Swiss clubs as I have so far. The Swiss league is ridiculously competitive. The Swiss league is ridiculously competitive, absolutely ridiculous. And ironically, historically, France is as well. France is very competitive historically. At the moment, it's a mess financially, but historically, very, very competitive. And then PSG broke everything. BSC, Young Boys, of Bern. You got Grasshopper and FC Zurich, and then you've got a lot of clubs have won a lot. And it's not just league titles; it's also Swiss Cups. There's a lot of silverware being shared around in Switzerland. Yes, Paris FC, the communists, are now in the top flight. Yes, very famously communist. although they got one of the wealthiest wealthiest families in France are owners of Paris FC. So they've got money, so it's not as if they're struggling for cash. And their stadiums are literally right next to each other. So they've built a new stadium, haven't they? And they're right next to the Parc des Princes. So that's going to be quite an interesting matchup. PSG don't have the biggest fan base in France. Marseille do, but don't let global PSG fans that you hear say that. They're not very well liked in France. PSG, they're actually quite hated. Yeah, it is because Paris FC. PSG is a merger of a couple of clubs in 1970, and I think Paris FC refused to be part of that. It's the same with Roma and Lazio. Lazio are the only club in Rome that didn't merge to form Roma back in, when was it? I think it was like 1924 or something ridiculous. The PSG foundation story is very similar to the Roma foundation story in Italy. And it's not the same club. It's Red Star Paris that merged in, and Paris FC refused to be part of the whole process of merging together to form PSG. They refused. And it's the same with Lazio. Lazio refused to merge with, I think, 4 or 5 other clubs in Rome to form Roma. They refused. And that's why the rivalry between Roma and Lazio is so nasty and so political, and it is violent. The Eternal Derby. It really is. And I've done, obviously, the histories of Roma and Lazio, but it's Red Star who merge, and it becomes PSG. The Paris FC you see today is different. It's completely different. Oh yeah, I mean, until PSG had all the money, St Etienne were actually the most successful French club, and people were saying when Lyon won 4 league titles in a row, oh, it's destroying French. It's just no, it's going to break French football. No, it wasn't. And then Monaco had all the money, and it's bad. Shut up, quack. But no, French football's a basket case because they've got no TV deal. They've scrapped their League Cup, which I think is ridiculous because it's a gate-driven league, and so clubs are reliant on the gate revenue to make money. Lyon have been kicked out the top flight. Bordeaux have been kicked out the top flight and gone bust. The whole thing is a mess. The reason why Monaco don't have a big fan base is you've got Marseille and Nice and Cannes all in the Côte d'Azur region, from Marseille to Nice, and then you've got Cannes, where I believe a certain Zinedine Zidane used to play for, I believe. You've got 3 clubs with bigger fan bases, obviously Marseille and Nice being quite sizable clubs, and then Cannes, obviously where the film festival's held, they've got a pretty sizable fan base as well. That creates a problem. And then you've got Montpellier not that far away either. So you've got four reasonably sized, and Grenoble and Lyon aren't a million miles away in the wider region of Provence and that Alpine region. There's some big clubs surrounding where Monaco is, and yeah, they're all pretty good. And that's a problem. A lot of people around who live outside Monaco will support Nice or Caen or Cannes or Marseille, or might be Grenoble or Lyon, and they will be in that Provence, Côte d'Azur region, and they will support those other clubs. And that is the problem. Because French football doesn't have the depth that the Italian league does, the German league does, our league system does, that that's the problem. The depth. People go, the French, they've won World Cups and Euros, and they've got these fantastic players they produced over the years, but they haven't got the depth past the second division. Regionally, the depth, it just goes off a cliff. Absolutely goes off a cliff. And you look at, if you've got a pie chart and you look at French sport, and this is stunning. Rugby, both kinds of rugby, ice hockey, pro cycling, motorsport, football, other winter sports, like ice skating, skiing, all that kind of stuff. The pie chart is really quite even in regards to the segments. It really is. Ironically, the participation rates and fan engagement, okay, take football and rugby union out of it to a certain extent, are also, again, very even. Serie A is getting bantered now for having 40-year-old like I'm going to put it out there. Baresi, Zoff, Buffon, Maldini, Costa Curta, they've always had 40-year-olds playing Serie A. I mean, Christ, I'm not gonna poke around here. Maldini played until I think he was 43. Costa Curta played until he was in his, I think, 46. There was the old Lazio goalkeeper played until he was 47. I think his name was Fontana. Dino Zoff played into his 40s. Baresi played until his late 30s. Yes, not a new thing having someone in their late 30s, early 40s playing in Serie A. They were doing it in the 80s and 90s. Just gonna say it, put it out there. Just gonna say that this banter on social media, I don't know where a lot of these so-called fans have been for the last 20, 30, 40 years, but I remember as a kid watching on Channel 4 the live game of the weekend and the highlight show. Some players in their late 30s, early 40s playing the game in Italy. So this, people go, Modric, it's a retirement home. Italian football, I don't know what it is about their players, but who play in that league, but they have longevity. And yeah, Giggs, he was in his 40s. He was well past. He was actually, I think, was he 43 when he retired? So I don't get this ban. I mean, a lot of the so-called banter on social media, I think, I don't think some of these people have actually watched Maldini continue to play into his 40s. Zoff played into it. I don't know where they've been. I honestly don't know where they've been for the 90s and the 2000s. I really don't. I think Maldini played over 5 decades. There you go. Played in 5 different decades or something stupid, or 4 different decades, 80s, 90s. Yeah, 4 different decades Maldini played. So I honestly, I don't know where some of these fans have been, but they've not been. It's just, words. Just words. I don't know where they've been. I remember watching Maldini in his early 20s. He debuted the year. Maldini debuted the year before I was born. He debuted in 1988. I was born in 1989. His entire career, up until retirement, was my entire life at that point, plus some. I think he's the same age as Jaromir Jagr in ice hockey, who's still playing, by the way. So when people say Serie A is a banter league, I mean, I give up with people in their 20s. They are fucking clueless. They really are. Younger people today, I just give up. I don't think people realise how good Maldini. No, I mean, look, I've been fortunate enough to actually see AC Milan train at their altitude training camp. in the 2000s when Ronaldinho and Kaká were in their prime, and Ambrosini and Inzaghi and Shevchenko. I've actually seen them train. Yeah. I think Jamie Vardy's playing at Cremonese. Ronaldinho, one of the best players ever to play the game. I think better than Messi and Ronaldo now. Honestly. Ronaldo, Messi, okay, for his dribbling ability, yeah, but Ronaldo, not even close to Ronaldinho. Not even close. All the fanboys who go and rap Ronaldo and Messi in their stats, they played in an era when, ironically, football was declining and has continued to decline. And I will say this, Ronaldinho didn't bugger off to the MLS or Saudi. Carried on playing in Europe. So, I'll let that sink in. Premier League fans are fucking clueless. They don't know what good football is. The Premier League on a week-to-week basis is actually shite. It really is shite. It's not on the same level as it was in the 90s. I can tell you that for a fact. In the 90s, if Tottenham and Man United had those points totals in any season in the 90s, they're getting relegated. They got lucky that the three promoted teams were that shite last season. They stayed up. In 8 separate seasons in Premier League history from 1992 until now, Man United and Tottenham would have got relegated last year. So there you go. I think the Premier League is overrated. I think the reason why it gets the attention it does is the TV deal in the US. That's the only reason, and the US interest in buying all our clubs and ruining them. For me, Serie A in the 90s and the Premier League in the 90s is better than the crap we have now. Before Bayern Munich's recent dominance spell in the Bundesliga, God, German football was good in the 90s. I'm not going to lie. Borussia Dortmund, Munich, Kaiserslautern were good. Oh my God, they were a good side. Stuttgart had a very good team back in the day. German football in the 90s was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Spanish football in the 90s and the 2000s was more competitive than it is now. Oh, that was fantastic. Yeah, West Ham got over 40-point win day, yeah. Yeah, no, Modric, he wants to play. He knows a lot of the players in Serie A that he's played with at various, at Spurs and at Real Madrid, and probably before his time at Spurs as well. There's a lot of Croatians who play in Serie A that he's played at international level with. And so, yeah, he wants to, play with his mates, basically. Fair play to him. And I think the Italian style will suit where he's at in his career. Fair play to Modric. Don't know. Jamie Vardy, he's had a really good start to his career at Cremonese. And they've had a good start to the season. In fact, they're unbeaten. They're top of the Italian league. He's 38. I'm sorry, when you've got players of this caliber who are still willing to play at a top level in Europe, fair play to them. Fair play. Maldini, one man, one club, AC Milan until he was 43, 44. I am sorry. I do not buy that the Premier League is the best league in the world. It's the best promoted league in the world. It's the most overpriced league in the world. And the TV deal shit. And the 3 p.m. blackout here in the UK is a farce. VPN it. I'm sorry. The fact that every other fan in the world outside the UK can watch every single pissing game in Scotland and England. Oh, yes, Scotland and England overseas. For me, that is a joke. I'm going to have a look at the highest points total the Premier League side has had and gone down. Hang on. I'm going to look at the highest points total a relegated team the Premier League has had. I think it's in the mid-40s. I think it's higher than what West Ham got. Bear with me. No, the Premier League's overrated. I much prefer watching like highest points total relegated in the Premier League. Here we go. Oh, 49 points. Crystal Palace, 1993. And that was in a 42-game season. And they got 7 points more than West Ham with 42 in 2003. So yes, someone who said 42. Yeah. Before 1996, you had a 22-team league, or 24-team league. Was it 22? Yeah, no. Oh shit. What am I doing? Yeah, no. When Blackburn won the Premier League with one of the lower points totals, you actually had to play 4 more games because you had 2 extra sides in the league. That's why it's a 42-game season. Yeah, it used to be a 22-team league until 1996. That was the last season. It was a 22-team league, and so 5 teams got relegated instead of 3. And that's because English clubs were allowed back into Europe after that, and so they had to shrink the league to fit in the European games. So there you go. Because of the European ban, the Premier League, when it first came along, was a bigger league. Team records, most titles, 13 Man United. Points. Man United still, Man City, Liverpool, Man City, 100, Liverpool 99, Man City 98, Liverpool 97, Chelsea 95, Man City 93, Chelsea 93, Liverpool 92, Man United 92, Man City 91. There you go. Fewest points. Oh God. Derby County. Remember that season? 11. 2007, 2008. Southampton. Last season, 12. Sunderland, 06, 15. Sheffield United, 2023, 2024, 16. Huddersfield Town, 2018, 2019, 16. Aston Villa, 2015, 2016, 17. Oh dear. Sunderland, 2000, 2003, 19. That was a terrible season. Portsmouth, 2009, 2010, but they were docked a lot of points. So remember that. They actually would have had more, but they had 19, but they were on minus points. Norwich City, 2019, 2020, 21. Norwich City, 2021, 2022, 22. So Norwich City and Sunderland are on here a few times. Fewest points. Yeah, most points in the season were being relegated. So the 42-game era was Palace with 49 in 92, 93, the first season of the Premier League. And 38 games by West Ham with 42 points in 2000, 2003. Most points while bottom of the league. 40 for Nottingham Forest in the 92-93 season. They had 40 points and were relegated. And Nottingham Forest in the 96-97 season in 38 games, the first 38-game season, 34. So Nottingham Forest have got the most points whilst bottom of the league and getting relegated in both the 42-game and the 38-game eras. There you go. Most points in a season by a team promoted the previous season. 77 by Newcastle United and Nottingham Forest in consecutive seasons in the 42-game era. So Newcastle United in the 93-94 season and Forest in the 94-95 season both got 77 points as a promoted side. That is ridiculous. And in 2000-2001, in the 38-game era, and this was a brilliant season by Ipswich Town, 66 points. There you go. Most wins in total in the Premier League era is Manchester United with 755 as of the end of last season. So this season, all the stats aren't in yet. Most home wins in a season is 18. Chelsea, Man United, Man City, and Liverpool have all done that, all in the 38-game era. Most away games in the season, Man City, again in the 38-game era. Fewest wins in the season, Derby County, 1. That's fewest wins in the season, 1. Fewest home wins, 1. Sunderland, Derby County, Ipswich Town, and Southampton. Fewest away games in the season, none. Leeds, Coventry, Wolves, Norwich City, Derby County, and Hull. Most consecutive wins, Man City and Liverpool. Most consecutive wins from the start of the season, Chelsea, 9. Oh, God. Defeated all league opponents at least once in a season. Chelsea, Man United, Man City, and Liverpool have all done that. Most different stadiums won at. 59 of 61 stadiums that have hosted Premier League matches, Liverpool. There you go. Most defeats in the Premier League era, Everton, 460. Most defeats in the season, Southampton with 30. Most home defeats in the season, Watford with 15. Most away defeats in the season, Burnley with 17. Most fewest defeats in the season, obviously Arsenal with the Invincibles with none. Fewest home defeats in the season with none. Man United, Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, Man City, and Spurs. Fewest away defeats, Arsenal, Man United. Most consecutive matches undefeated, Arsenal. Most consecutive home matches undefeated, Chelsea with 86 home games consecutively undefeated between 20th of March 2004 and the 5th of October 2008. Most consecutive away matches defeated, 29. Manchester United between the 17th of February 2020 and 19th of September 2021. Wow. Even when Man United winning all those trophies, they didn't have that many consecutive away matches undefeated. Most consecutive defeats over more than one season, 20. Sunderland. Well, there you go. Most consecutive defeats from the start of the season, Portsmouth and Crystal Palace. 7. There you go. Draws, Everton again, 356 draws. Everton. Most draws in a season in the 42-game era, with 18, Man City, Sheffield United, and Southampton. Man City and Sheffield United were in 93-94 seasons, and Southampton in 94-95. 18 draws. Most draws in a season in the 38-game era, 17. Newcastle United, Aston Villa, and Sunderland have all done that. Most draws in a season, 10. Home draws, 10. Sheffield Wednesday, Leicester City, Manchester United have all done that. Most away draws in a season, 10. Newcastle United and Manchester United have done that. Fewest draws in a season, 2. Fewest home draws in a season, none. Wow. It's just some of these are ridiculous stats. Oh, wow. Most yellow cards in total since 1992 up until last season, 2,081, Chelsea. Most red cards in total since 1992, not including this season, Arsenal, 110. Most yellow cards in a season, 105 for Chelsea in 2023-2024. Fewest yellow cards in a season, 12. Coventry City in the 93-94 season. Apparently Coventry City in the early 90s, very clean side. Most red cards in a season, 9. Sunderland in 2009-2010 or QPR in 2011-2012. Most yellow cards in a single match, 14 between Bournemouth and Chelsea. So Chelsea win 1-0. Bournemouth had 6 yellows. Chelsea had 8, and that was on the 14th of September 2024. Most cards for a single team in a game. For Tottenham Hotspur were 9 in a 2-2 draw at Chelsea back in 2016. Most penalties awarded to a team in the season, 14 Man United. Most penalties conceded by a team in the season, 13 for Hull. Wow. Highest attendance, Spurs, Arsenal at Wembley. Lowest attendance, Wimbledon, Everton at Selhurst Park. 3,039 fans. Highest average of season attendance, Man United was 75,800 odd in the 06-07 season. Lowest average attendance was 8,500 for Wimbledon in 92-93. Wow, that is insane. Some of these records are ridiculous. But yes, Palace have the most points in the season and get relegated. No, Sam. Well, potentially on goals conceded, but that still, with the first team to concede 100 goals in a season, was Swindon Town. Maybe. But bearing in mind, at that point, Wimbledon couldn't play at Plough Lane. They were ground sharing with Crystal Palace, who are big rivals, obviously. And yeah, there was a lot of unhappiness within the fan base of Wimbledon Football Club at the time with what was going on. And eventually they would become MK Dons. You say that, but we shall see. We shall see. We shall see. There have been some shocking. Look, I don't think a club can concede 100 goals in a season. That's Swindon Town's record. Maybe one of the private sides has one of the sides that gets relegated has an absolute mare, but I think there's going to become a point where UEFA, it can't happen. I think the various players' unions will start taking a stand against increasing the amount of European games. Like a club like Burton Albion, they would have to increase the capacity of the Pirelli. They would have to. Let's say like a Cambridge United were to. I'm going to say Cambridge United. They've got a decent fan base, and they're from a decent sized city, so there's the potential that you could build the fan base. Look, if like a Cambridge United or a Dagenham and Redbridge or a Barnet club like that, I don't know, an older shot, the stadium they play would have to be definitely expanded. I don't know where Burton Albion comes up with the Pirelli, but the Pirelli would Exeter City, for example, they would have to make massive improvements to the Exeter St James's Park for it to be classed as Premier League standard. Tranmere, Prenton Park, there may have to be, but then Bradford City with Valley Parade, that's the next Premier League ground. If it was to be a Premier League ground today, there would have to be massive upgrades done to, Bradford City's Valley Parade. But I would have no doubt that if like a club, well, Blackpool made the Premier League, didn't they? Like a Fleetwood Town or if a Yeovil or whatever insert club here, if someone comes along with money, buys a club, like it does a Wrexham. But with Wrexham, what they're doing, I know they're struggling so far this season because reality's hit that, the Championship's quite a cutthroat league. But what they were doing alongside getting these promotions, they were improving the racecourse ground. They were rebuilding the Kop at the racecourse ground to bring it up to a better standard. They invested money in the facilities as they were going up from the non-league to the Championship. And that is something that would have to happen to a small club like a Burton or a Yeovil or a Torquay. Someone comes along and goes, I'm going to buy that club. They would obviously have to improve the playing facilities, the stadium. It's happened to Gateshead in the National League. They were denied the playoffs because of their stadium situation with Tyne Wear City Council because of their arrangement with where they play up in Gateshead, where they share with the Newcastle Falcons, who are now sponsored by Red Bull and owned by Red Bull. But Gateshead were denied National League playoffs. I don't know if it was last season or the season before. Over stadium issues, so it has happened. Altrincham have been denied entry into the Football League when you had to go through the voting process. It has happened. I think it happened to Gretna in Scotland. They had to play their games. I think Motherwell they had to play their games. There is precedent. I think it's wrong, but I would. Look at what happened with Luton. They had to spend all this money on the upgrades to the stadium to be Premier League compliant for the VAR and the goal line tech. We'll see what happens to Wrexham. I think they need to establish themselves a little bit in the Championship. And I think their goal this season is to be a Championship side come season's end. Now, there happens to be 3 clubs right now that are worse than them. significantly, which I think helps. And I think there's some other clubs above them that aren't looking particularly good right now. So I think they are. They've decided to expand the playoff structure for the National League or something, because there's the debate around, should it be 3 down, 3 up instead of 2 up. I think that they are looking at changing how it all goes. But that's again outside the Football League, and what may work for one league structure may not work for another in regards to the finances, stadium availability, length of season. What works for one sport doesn't work for another. What works for one league structure doesn't work for another. What's been agreed with the clubs and the governing body. And look at Scotland with their playoff structure; it's a mess. In my opinion, the Scottish playoff structure is a joke. Yes, they are looking at the potential, because there's so many ex-Premier League clubs and the old Division 1 clubs stuck in the Championship that have played in the top flight, that they are considering altering the playoff structure. I think it's a very dangerous, slippery slope you're going down when you start fiddling with it, because that means extending the length of the season. I think it's a very slippery slope you start heading down when you start expanding it and you extend the length of the season, and then you might as well have half the fucking league in the playoffs at that point. Get participation awards, because we're gonna get potentially some really bad teams getting promotion. You could have a team, if let's say they continue to expand the playoffs, and you go right, half the league go, the top 2 automatic, then the rest, about half the league goes into a playoff structure. You could have a mid-table Championship side make the Premier League and be demolished, absolutely demolished, and it does football no good having whip. But I don't know. The EFL, it means money. It means money and TV revenue and gate receipts. It means money. They're not doing it for the benefit of the game. They're doing it for the benefit of the EFL. Look, footballing governing, sport governing bodies, they're not very good at governing. Let's just say that. There's a lot of self-interest. There's a lack of cooperation and common sense. So, like Salford, for example, have not applied for their license for next year for Super League. Yet 7 Championship clubs have applied to be considered for Super League, for that expanded Super League from 12 to 14. There's too much self-interest. I'm surprised Salford Red Devils are still going and they haven't collapsed, but there's too much self-interest. There's far too much self-interest right now in a lot of it's money. Like the expansion of the Super League. I mean, I understand why Wigan abstained, and I can understand for a certain extent why both Hull clubs voted against. Because Hull FC, in theory, could be out undergrading because they've been shit for a couple of years. And they got away with it last year because they put the queue in the rack and they knew with their grading they were going to be safe, so they didn't bother. Which I think completely undermined the competitive nature of what up until that point had been promotion relegation. Yeah, look, but the gap between League 2 and League 1 isn't as big as the gap between the Championship and the Premier League, I think. And if they continue down the path of potentially expanding the playoffs, you could get a really, really crap mid-table Championship side, could make the Premier League, and then suddenly we're like, oh my God, why is... I don't know what would be a really bad Championship side now, because ironically, let's say Oxford United turn things around this season, go on a run. Can you imagine Oxford United in the modern era, not the 80s or not the 80s when they're a top flight side, but in the modern era in 2026? Can you imagine Oxford United being a Premier League side with the Kassam, a stadium that doesn't have a full stand? Can you imagine like an Oxford United making the Premier League, because that is the potential that could happen. Hypothetically, they've had a poor start to the season, but they can go on a run of form, end up in the playoffs, hypothetically, and make the Premier League. They'll get destroyed. Absolutely. They haven't got the money. They would get absolutely annihilated in the Premier League. It's a money maker for the clubs that get that extra game or 2 games or 3 games, how many games they end up playing in the playoffs. It's just turnstiles. It honestly, we could have some really poor teams get promoted and slaughtered, which then is just a bad look for the Premier League when you've got a side losing 6-0 every week, 7-0 every week, getting hammered, making Derby County and Southampton look world class. That would be embarrassing. Like, can you? I'm trying to think who. I think every club apart from Wrexham. I think every club apart from Wrexham in the Championship has played in the top flight. And that's including the old Division 1 and what is now the Premier League. I'm going to have a little look because I've done the club histories of pretty much every club. So I'm going to have a look at. Here we go. Right. I'm going to be really sad and I'm going to look at the table and I'm going to tell you. Right. Let's go through this. Sheffield United have played in the Premier League. Sheffield Wednesday have played in the Premier League. Oxford United have played in the old Division 1 and have won silverware. Wrexham, let me come back and check you on that. Hull, ex-Premier League. Derby County, ex-Premier League. Charlton, Premier League. Watford, Premier League. Blackburn have won the Premier League. Southampton have Premier League. Ipswich, Premier League. Millwall have played in the old Division 1. QPR, Premier League. Birmingham City, Premier League. Norwich City, Premier League. Portsmouth, Premier League. Preston, old Division 1. Swansea, Premier League. Coventry City, Premier League. West Brom, Premier League. Leicester City, Premier League. Bristol City, old Division 1. Stoke City, Premier League. Middlesbrough, Premier League. So the only club that I can think of right now in the Championship that has not played in the top flight, I think, is Wrexham. And they're currently in the Championship. I think every other club has played either in the old Division 1 when it was the top flight, or the Premier League in the Championship. So let's find an average. What right now would be an average Championship club that could potentially get promotion, and they're going to get slaughtered? I would say Preston, if they were to get promotion. Let's say that the season stops now and they expand the playoffs. Let's say the top 2 get automatic, and then the third club comes through the playoffs. So they want to expand it. So you have 2, 4, 6. Yeah, so let's get down to Preston in 8th. Let's say Preston get promotion. They would get absolutely slaughtered in the Premier League. Not going to lie. Let's say they expand it a bit further. Let's say we're down to 12th or 14th. I think Millwall will be interesting, actually, because they'll just kick lumps out of everyone, and their fans would kick lumps out of everyone. But any club, you know, in the Championship. I mean, Bristol City, they've been a Division 1 side. Admittedly not for very long, but can you? This is what I don't get. I think what they've done at Wrexham, they've transformed that community, brought a lot of positivity to an area that hadn't been positive for a very long time. And I do think their ultimate goal is to make the top flight. And if even it's for a couple of seasons, I think I wouldn't say there's a bit of jealousy there, but you've got to imagine. Here's the thing: you look at some of the clubs they're playing against, and you look at their trophy cabinets, and you take away all the Welsh Cups that Wrexham have won. They haven't got any. You look at the clubs they are playing against who've played in the old Division 1 in the Premier League and they've got trophy cap. Right, Sheffield United trophies, Sheffield Wednesday trophy. Oxford United have won the League Cup. Hull City have made an FA Cup final. Derby County have won trophies. Charlton have won trophies. Watford, nothing. Blackburn, yes. Southampton, yes. Ipswich, won in Europe. Millwall, no trophies. QPR have got a League Cup. Birmingham City have got a couple of trophies. Norwich have got a couple of trophies. Portsmouth, a couple of FA Cups and a few leagues in there. Preston, first League Cup double. 2 league titles. Swansea, League Cup. Coventry, FA Cup. West Brom, multiple trophies. Leicester, multiple trophies. Bristol City, no trophies. Stoke. I've got to double check on Stoke. Middlesbrough, League Cup. They're playing against some pretty successful clubs historically. So that's really interesting. But yeah, if they were, you have to admit, the promotion relegation system that the potential to achieve bigger. I think this is what Americans are starting to understand about the European sporting culture is that potential that your club can go from a lower level to a high level and succeed. And aspirational, which is the American dream, is aspiration, right? And I think that appeals to it's the aspiration side of it appeals to North Americans. And the more they learn about all the history of all the clubs and the history of the game, the more they actually understand that aspirational side of things. It works. Okay, Stoke won a League Cup. Okay. So there's only a handful of clubs in the Championship. I think it's Millwall, Hull, and Bristol City that haven't won any silverware. Every other club has won silverware. Now, if you class Wrexham's Welsh Cup successes, which they've got a lot, until they were barred from entry, I think in 1995 by the Welsh FA. That's Swansea, Cardiff, Merthyr Tydfil, Newport County, and Wrexham were barred from entering the Welsh Cup for perverse reasons, but by the by. There's only 3 clubs in the Championship that haven't got silverware. Historic. That is a ridiculously successful league when you look at the success all those clubs have had and you combine it all together. That's a lot of trophies and a lot of history. And yeah, obviously with the ownership investing in the stadium as they progress through the league system, I think is a win. And there's some clubs around them that are really struggling as well. So their objective this season is to remain a Championship club and build. And again, they've got some players coming in. They've got the transfer window in January. They can add, they can freshen that squad up. They still believe their objective is to make the Premier League. It's like Blackpool making the Premier League for that one season, or Bradford City for 2 seasons. It is that we want to make the top flight. Swindon Town are an ex-Premier League side, for Christ's sake. So there is that aspirational aspect to it. Yeah, I mean, look, it's been a while since Cardiff have been at that level. Unfortunately, your ownership is an absolute shambles. I'm not going to hide away from that fact. The ownership of Cardiff, along with the ownership of a lot of clubs, is in my opinion, an absolute joke. And look what happened with Morecambe nearly going out of business in the summer. I mean, look, it's not just a football only issue and bad team ownership and bad team management in regards to the boardroom and decisions taken on a corporate level. But we not only see this in European sport, so rugby union, rugby league, football, we see it in North America. We see it in Australia and New Zealand. We see it all over the world. Bad ownership and bad decisions taken in the boardroom is more common than you think. North American leagues, Christ, there are some bad owners that make Vincent Tan look competent. No, seriously. You think Vincent Tan is a shocking owner, which he is. There are some North American owners of the major leagues who make Vincent Tan not only look like a good owner, but like a successful owner and competent. And I am not joking on that. I am not joking that Vincent Tan actually comes across, if you on the scale of shocking owners, of which as a Blackburn fan we have the Venkeys. Some of the owners in North America in the major leagues make the Venkeys and Vincent Tan and what's happening at Sheffield Wednesday, what happened at Morecambe, some of the other clubs, Salford Red Devils in Rugby League. There are some owners in the North American major leagues that make these ownership groups, Cellini, what happened to Brescia in Italy, that makes some of these really shockingly bad, criminally bad owners in Europe and even in Australia and New Zealand look competent and world class. There are some very bad owners in North American sports, like to the point where you're thinking to yourself, God forbid if they ever buy my football club or rugby league club or ice hockey team or whatever team you support here in the UK or Europe, and you're going, please don't invest over here, and you're begging them not to. If Cardiff, Swansea, and Wrexham and Newport County were all in the same league, I think that would be fantastic. Just fantastic. But unfortunately, at the moment, it's not going to happen. Not unless someone comes along and buys Newport County and Cardiff can turn things around and get promoted. It's not going to happen. Oh, Merthyr Tydfil as well. Oh, God. I mean, look, as I say, yes, that would be a fantastic thing for Welsh football. Oh, look, Newport, they're still a Football League side. They're not great, but they find a way of surviving in League Two. It would be great if they had more money behind them and could play at a higher level and could achieve what Swansea and Cardiff have by playing in the Premier League, and Swansea in more recent times winning a major silverware, playing in Europe, with what Wrexham are doing in their journey. Admittedly, they are finding life in the Championship a bit of a shock to the system from where they have been. But, yeah, look, unfortunately, not every cloud has silver linings and not every dream can become a reality. And that is just, there's obviously limited amount of clubs can be in certain leagues and there's a ceiling to certain things. And it's what it is. And South Wales, with what's going on with Welsh Rugby Union right now, it's a tough time for sport in Wales in general. I think is a good way to look at it. And we've discussed Welsh sport and Welsh sporting infrastructure and, where the money isn't at, which is there's not a lot, and where the money is at, which there's not a lot. And unfortunately, it seems Wrexham have the best ownership out of the Welsh professional clubs. And I say that not with any joy. It's just facts. And yeah, Swansea, Cardiff, I don't think are where they want to be. And Newport, I think, with their limited resources, somehow continues to scrap and fight in League Two. And Merthyr Tydfil are where they are in the non-league because that's the reality of the local economy and where they're at, and what the fans can afford and such and so forth. The same discussions can be had for any league structure anywhere across Europe. And yeah, hopefully at some point they do, and that will benefit the community, the club, and Welsh football. But that's the reality. And look at the state Welsh Rugby Union's in. Financially, it's a mess. Welsh Rugby League, it's a mess. And so this is the reality of the conversation. This is the reality of where they're at financially, management, like ownership wise. This is where things are at. Yeah, but again, he's only going to have a limited amount of funds, and at some point, he as one of the backers is going to have to reach out to say that we need further investment if this project is to continue and we are to climb the slippery slope that is the Football League pyramid. That is unfortunately the reality of it. Is they're going to need further outside investment. Well, it's Merthyr Tydfil. Merthyr Tydfil is the arse end of nowhere. Not being harsh, but it's not necessarily the most romantic getaway location, is it? It is in basically the former mining regions of South Wales. That is where Merthyr Tydfil is. It's in the ex-industrial mining regions of South Wales, which is not necessarily the most attractive, romantic part of the world. And then if you think about it, put it this way. Let's say you do start investing and you start building something. There's going to have to be negotiations with the local, bus and trains and all that. And they may have to find a new site to build a new stadium. And that, again, money. And planning permissions and local councils can be... It's like, look at Chester's ground. It's in two countries, for Christ's sake. And that, during COVID, was a nightmare. And there has to come a point where, stadium location, it's a pain. Look, the way that the National League North and South is structured, it depends on who gets relegated and who gets promoted, and it starts to become absolute headache for the non-league, because you've got National League, you've got the Isthmian League, you've got Northern Premier, you've got all these various non-league leagues that aren't Football League leagues. And they have their own governing bodies, and then they have to figure out who's in what region. Is it north and south to go through? And it's just a frigging mess. Let's be honest. It is an absolute shambles below the National League. Let's be honest. It gets to a point where they try and figure it. It's just an absolute farce. But that's part of the problem. There is that debate that the National League, as things currently stand, should be absorbed into the Football League. That could potentially be a reality in the future. Enough of the clubs are fully professional. Yes, that is a potential reality, and it's not a new idea. It's an idea that some have put forward in recent years. I remember with my old next door neighbour, I think he was a Farnborough player, and he got transferred to Stevenage. And the year he went to Stevenage was, was it 2002? I think it was about 2002. It was after Farnborough played Arsenal when they were what is in the conference, which is now the National League, and he got transferred to Stevenage. And I think at the time, Farnborough was signing players to full-time contracts. And this is in the early 2000s in the non-league. And then Stevenage decided to go to full-time status at the time. And bearing in mind, my old next door neighbour, Mike Warner, that was his name. I don't know if he's still alive or not. He was in his 30s. He was 33, 34 when he retired with knee problems, and that was in the early 2000s. That's about 20-odd years ago. When he was a part-time player, when he was semi-pro, he was a Coca-Cola delivery driver, and he had his van, his Coca-Cola van, and he would go around delivering not only to sports clubs. That was his delivery route, was all the local amateur and semi-pro sports clubs in the Thames Valley. And when he was at Farnborough, they had that FA Cup run. I think was it the 5th round they played Arsenal? Anyway, they play Arsenal, and his job was to man Mark Vieira. And of course, Arsenal battered them on the day, but that's by the by. It was a televised game as well, which was fantastic. It was the Vauxhall Conference when he was playing in it. That's how long ago that was, the old Vauxhall Conference. But and then it became Nationwide Conference before it became National League. Now, this is in, I think, 2001. He was a Farnborough player. I think 2000, was it 2? I think it was 2000 because he moved in 2004. He started his career at Northampton Town, and he was a professional player for a handful of seasons before his contract wasn't renewed, and he needed to do something. So he wanted to keep playing. He signed with Farnborough. He became semi-pro, became a delivery driver for Coca-Cola, regionally from the Thames Valley. That was his area. And while he was, I think it was the Southeast actually, and while he was at Farnborough, he played in the FA Cup, did really well. Man marked Vieira for 90 minutes, which was not easy back in Vieira's prime. And then he transferred to Stevenage. And it was his first season at Stevenage in that pre-season, I think it was 2002, that Stevenage Borough, as they were then, decided to go completely to full-time status. Every player would be a professional, they would go to full-time status. And he signed his second full-time contract because he had been a full-time player at Northampton back in the day, Northampton Town, and earlier in his career. And they went to full-time status about 22, 23 years ago. Two and a half seasons later or something, he had to retire because his knees were shot. He had both his knees had to be operated on. He was a good left back, very good left back, and very good defensive midfielder. And in the end, he was playing full time, decided to move up to Stevenage with his wife and kids. And but for a couple of years, I had a professional football player as my next door neighbour on a little housing estate in Bracknell, and he didn't have a big house. And everyone thinks football players got these massive houses. He was in a tiny little terrace new build that was a 2-bed with a tiny garden, and I was in the 3-bed house next door, semi-detached, and he had a terraced house, and it was a tiny house, and he had a growing family. He moved up to Stevenage. There you go. And then he retired, I think in his second or third season at Stevenage. It was like 2004 he retired because his knees were gone, and he retired very young. I think it was early 30s. And that was 20 odd years ago. So he'd be in his early 50s now, I would have thought. I would have hazarded a guess. But yeah, no, I remember him and his wife used to get on with my mum. They were, my mum was a little bit older, and my stepdad were a little bit older than he was, by about, I'm going to say about 10 years older. And him and his wife were always very friendly. He used to come over, we used to have them over for barbecues and for dinner and all that. And then his neighbour, the other side, was my mate Ben and his sister Alice. And their dad was a Leicester City fan anyway. We used to all have kickabouts down the park and all that. And yeah, he used to come around my house quite regularly and have barbecues and all that, and fry-ups. And it was quite, yeah. And then I got to see Vieira's framed shirt. And this was the Arsenal Invincibles era kind of thing. And yeah, so my next door neighbour was a professional football player for a few years. There you go. You just have to mark Vieira, kick him, get under his skin. It's the middle of winter, FA Cup, so I just be a bit new. Can you imagine trying to kick the shit out of Patrick Vieira when Patrick Vieira and Roy Keane used to go head to head, toe to toe in the Premier and Vieira's prime? The guy's won a World Cup, the guy's won a Euros, and is captain of Arsenal. And your job is to kick the shit out of him and stand up to him. And to be fair, I will give him Mike Warner his credit. He did. He stood up to Mark Patrick Vieira, and at the end, Vieira swapped shirts with him and said, "Fair play." And he also had Farnborough Town's only shot on goal in the game at Highbury. This is Highbury. This is the the Arsenal Invincible season. And his job that season was to try and man Mark Vieira and get under his skin. Oh, not a clue. When he was at Farnborough Town, he was semi-pro, so it wouldn't have been a lot of money. And at Stevenage, we're not talking. He was earning enough that he did not have to be a delivery driver anymore. So it wouldn't have been a lot. It would have been, early 2000s, I would say. If you were earning over 20, 30 grand a year, you could get by. So it wouldn't have been a massive amount. It would only been a few grand more than what I'm on a year now. But back then, 23, 24 years ago, 30 grand a year. That'd be like, what, 90 grand a year now? Something like that in real terms. So in footballing terms, not a lot of money. In our terms, he was, a millionaire in my eyes because he was professional. I thought, wow. When you're a young kid growing up and you're next door mate, yeah, so basically enough to get by, not have to have any worries. The mortgage is getting paid, or your bill. If you bought the house outright, your bills are getting paid. Your kids have got food on the table, which means the wife probably doesn't have to work, even though if she wanted to, she could. And she was from Finland. His wife was from Finland. That was the first Scandinavian person I ever met, was his wife. And she was hilarious. Her English accent, her Finnish accent was so funny. It was like listening to Kimi Räikkönen with tits. And this is when Kimi Räikkönen is first in F1 and Mika Häkkinen's fighting Michael Schumacher at the time for F1 titles and Mika Salo. And it literally was a female version of like Mika Häkkinen or Kimi Räikkönen or Mika Salo. Hello, I'm from... It was the weirdest accent. And I was just like, wow, this is crazy. Professional footballer, wife from like, wow, yeah. And it was weird because as like, I wasn't even a teenager. I was only 11 at the time. I think it might be 9 or 10 when he first moved in. So he lived next door for about 4 or 5 years. And me and my mate Ben used to try and kick the ball over the gardens. So his garden's in between. I had a bigger garden and Ben had the smaller garden. And I would try and ping it. Yeah, about 98. I think it was World Cup 98, maybe 99 he moved in. And me and my mate Ben were pinging footballs at each other and try and half volley. And he would watch this and he was like, do you mind if I join in? And my mate Ben's dad and my mum were like, who are you? He was like, I play for Farnborough Town. I play for one of the local football clubs. Your two lads seem to be having a laugh. Do you mind if I join in? And he would be in the middle and he would one touch it over, or he would head it over, or he would chest it over, and we would try and volley it to it. It was hilarious. And then the whole row of houses would get involved. This was the thing. There was a guy at the last house at the end, right at the back. And like you got Del Boy in 90 Fools and Horses. He was a bit of a character. He was a bit like Snatch, Layer Cake, kind of bit of a gangster, medallion man. And he would always be in his sun lounger reading The Sun. This is when The Sun had boobies in it. And he was a gangster. He was. This guy was sovereigned up, all apples and pears. It was proper dodgy geezer in the sense of he hurt people. He weren't dodgy like Jimmy Savile. He was dodgy like Ronnie and Reggie Craig dodgy. Like, he was a nice guy, just didn't want to debate about it. He was the type of guy who wouldn't mind putting a claw hammer through your knee. But you could tell he was a retired gangster. Then you had the crazy cat lady. No. The crazy cat lady. Then you had my mate Ben and Alice and their dad Simon, who was an armed response. He did Heathrow and close protection for the Royals. Then you had the professional football player Mike Warner. Then you had me, and then you had the lesbians next door. Yeah, they didn't like kids. They were proper lesbians next door. And then you had a couple of my mates at the bottom of the cul-de-sac. Then you had my mate Dan, who lived opposite, from Scotland. He's a Hearts fan, but he's from Dunfermline. And they were there. And there were a couple of lads who lived at the bottom of the roads who were a good laugh. And so there was a few of us all roughly the same age, at the time. And yeah, Mike Warner you can find him on Football Manager, the early football managers and championship managers from the late 90s, early 2000s, Farnborough Town, Stevenage Borough. You'll find him. Anyway, yeah. I've got a friend from Inverness who supports Cali Thistle, so there you go. Takes one. One of my best friends is a Hibs fan. It happens. So yeah, his Mike Warner was his name, and so I forget the geezer who lived on the far end house, but I can tell you now he was a proper guy, LMA, maybe Football Manager, LMA Manager, that kind of thing. Some of the early ones from about 90, I'm going to say late 90s, early 2000s. You'll find him as a Farnborough player and as a Stevenage player. But no, this geezer at the end, he was literally, you could tell he had retired young and didn't need to work. Yeah, and what was funny, if the ball went right in the end garden, me and my mate Ben, we would hop over all the garden fences and we would take turns running over the garden fences to get the footballs and the tennis balls because we also liked our cricket as well. And we would hop over all the garden fences. It literally looked like we were committing burglary. The person who lived in Mike's house before he lived there, the football player, she was a copper. This is hilarious. So I used to have a live on a street. I police officer, armed response, police officer, dog unit with road traffic. Weird. So two of my neighbours were coppers. Anyway, her husband was a dickhead, another copper, and she kicked him out. And he took all the spare keys, and she got locked out. And so we get a knock on the front door. Now my mum knew that number 11, police officer, number 10, police officer. So Simon was my mate's dad. And I forget this woman's name, but police officer. So we get a knock on the door. My mum opens the door. Now, I'm an annoying ADHD kind of difficult child. And my friend Ben, difficult child. And we're like, oh shit, oh god. And my mum was like, thought it was either me or my sister were in trouble. My sister's older, so she thought my sister had got in trouble because I was at home, so I can't be in trouble because I've just got out of bed. It's Saturday. But my sister was with her friends. My sister's like 4 or 5 years older. We get this knock on the door, and my mum instantly thinks the worst when a police officer knocks on the door in uniform. You're thinking, shit. And obviously I'm at home, so I can't be in trouble. And she assumes it's my sister's, something's happened, something terrible. And she was like, no. And insert mother's name here, because my mum and my dad were technically separated, hadn't completed their divorce, so she hadn't remarried and a different last name. And she was like, could I borrow your son? Could your son break into my house so I could unlock my house to get into my house because my ex-husband has stolen the keys and I've forgotten my keys. Can't find my keys. He's got all the spare. And so this is hilarious. So we let her in. She comes through. Do you want a cup of tea first? And she was like, how do you want my son to break into your house? Well, I've got my French windows at the top of the back door are unlocked. So as a skinny, gangly 10-year-old, I think this was the year that I might be 9, 10. I think this was the week before she sold the house. So I would have been, was it 98, 99, 2000? About this time, about 9 or 10 years old. I was basically told by a police officer to break into their house. So I get through the window and my mum is like, be careful, don't hurt yourself. And she's like, he'll be fine. And I go arse over tit through the French window. And I go through this table. Anyway, I've got in the house. I'm in the house. I've gone through a table. And when I say I've gone through a table, it was a glass table, by the way. Anyway, so I've shouted, I'm in. So they walk around the front of the houses. So they go around the front. And I open the front door to this house. And I've cut myself in a few places. There's a bit of blood. And a trip to A&E. And I go to my next door neighbour. I was like, I'm very, very sorry. I've broken your glass table. I fell. She went, oh, don't worry about it. It's the ex-husband's. It's okay. Bearing in mind, I'm terrified of her police dog, which also the dog handlers, the dog will live with you. And I'm quite scared of this police dog, which is a massive Alsatian. Terrified of this dog. I forget the dog. I think it's called like Saxon or Odin or some kind of Viking Saxon name or Beowulf or something. And I'm like, shit. And she was, don't worry, it's the ex-husband's. It's fine. And I'm like, shit. And I'm only like a kid. And my mum was like, I'm so sorry, we'll pay for the table. We'll pay for the table. She went, no, it's the ex-husband's. He's going to get it in the divorce. I'll give it him. I'll send it to him. I'll send it to him in the divorce. I'm just like, shit. So anyway, because I'm like all cuts and bits of glass, we get rushed to Heatherwood, which at the time had an A&E, which if you watch Carry On Doctor, Carry On Matron, and Carry On Nerd, the Carry On films, that's the hospital in the Carry On films. Heatherwood, Ascot, by Ascot Racecourse. So we rush up to her, and I have to take all this glass out of me and patch me up and, disinfectant. And, oh, God, this is going to stick. And because I was such a good boy, I got a lollipop and a sticker. And I'm like, bits of me patched up and I'm covered in plasters. Anyway, a couple of weeks later, Your next door neighbour moves in, he's a football player. There you go. But I was told by a police officer to break into their house. So I did. I just so happened to fall through a glass table. It really hurt. I don't advise falling through a glass table. It's not fun. My mum still laughs at me now. I was like, well, I was told to do it. She said, didn't mind. Just gone through her fucking husband's table. If I was to do that now, I'd be like, love, I've got a criminal record. I'm not doing it. This is entrapment. Not something that happens every day. And when Mike Warner moved in and my mum explained, he said, don't lose the spare keys. He goes, why? Well, my son's had to break into this house once and let the previous owner in, broke. So if you find glass in the carpet, and my mum explained to him like how there was little shards of glass in the carpet still that they couldn't get out. And he was like, very sorry. He was a good sport about it. But no, he was a good laugh. And yeah, not every day that your next door neighbour got to man Mark Vieira for 90 minutes in an FA Cup tie. He Farmer Town and Stevenage Borough and Northampton Town. He might have a Wikipedia entry, I don't know, but he did play for Farmer Town. And he did play for Stevenage Borough. I remember that. But no, that's one of my formative memories as a young kid. Was for a few years my next door neighbour was a pro football player. And how many kids can grow up saying that and still remember it 20, 25 years, all these years later? I don't know why Stevenage decided to change, to rebrand. They did it whilst obviously they still are a Football League club. It was after they made the Football League, they decided very, very quickly to go, right, we're going with this rebrand and we're embracing but clubs change their name all the time. Like AFC Bournemouth used to be AFC Bournemouth and Boscombe. Oh God, there's a few clubs that have, changed name or rebranded, changed logo, changed club colours, changed the club crest. Brighton and Hove Albion. Their full name is Brighton Hove Albion, but we just call them Brighton. Walsall used to be called Walsall Swifts because of the Swift on the logo. That's why the Swift's on the logo. There's a lot of reasons why clubs rebrand, change logos, change the club colours. Yep, Port Vale used to be Burslem Port Vale. Yes, absolutely. Oh God, I've got to think of some other ones now. There's a few that have gone through a variety, like Newton Heath become Manchester United. And there's that. The Accrington Stanley, the original Accrington was just Accrington Football Club, and it goes through several iterations, and now you have Accrington Stanley. Why I don't know, but that is why. Yeah, loads of clubs have gone through various iterations, as I say, rebrandings, colour changes. Like West Ham United is not their original name. It's Thames. Is it? Oh God, no! It's something square. Is it Square Dial? Is it Square Dial? Dial Square? Because in the Woolwich Arsenal there was this big square with the sundial, and they've gone through Thames Ironworks. So West Ham have got a real history with the Woolwich Arsenal. I think it was Dials. Was it West Ham? It was either West Ham or Arsenal. Dial Square. Was it Dial Square? I've got to remember the pissing. It's going to annoy me now, but there's certain. I think it was Dial Square FC, and then it becomes West Ham. But Leighton Orient have moved, and they were Clacton Orient. And then they become Leighton, go to Leighton, so they become Leighton Orient. Yeah, West Ham, I think, have lost something. I think, and considering in the decade before they move, or the decade and a half, they upgrade the Boleyn Ground, Upton Park. They upgrade it. They increase the capacity. So it makes you wonder what it just is. It is what it is. Yeah, I think a lot of fans feel a disconnect between the stadium they're using. It's terrible. It doesn't work for football. It works for track and field athletics, and it works for certain sporting events, but it doesn't work for football. It doesn't. And I can understand why clubs like Leighton Orient, for example, were concerned that it's getting into their catchment area. Yes, Leighton Orient are a smaller club, yes. But you can see why Leighton Orient raised objections going, actually, you're in our catchment area and it could adversely impact our club because you're now playing. It's what it is. It is what it is. But we are where we are. There's and I can see why fans feel that kind of disconnect, that frustration, anger, loss of identity. I can see why, and I remember in the 2000s, West Ham spent a lot of money upgrading Upton Park. So it wasn't that long ago they increased the capacity, and then they up sticks and move, to the current home. And I just, it's the same with Arsenal leaving Highbury and going to the Emirates. It's lost something. It's the same. People go rave about Spurs' stadium. Why couldn't they call it New White Hart Lane? Why is it the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and they still can't get naming rights for it? And people rave about how it's this upgraded, this fantasy. I think stadiums now are losing character and the clubs are losing identity, and I think they're all a bit soulless, if I'm honest. Like Loftus Road is an archaic reminder of what stadiums used to be like. Although I do like the new Brentford Community Stadium, I will say that. Look, I wonder how long Everton ladies are going to use Goodison Park before that does become life expired. And also, why didn't Everton do what Liverpool did with Anfield and continue to upgrade him in situ? I just don't understand that. Well, what do you mean? What do Everton average attendance? Over the years, Liverpool is an interesting city when it comes to the fan base. The women, I wouldn't be able to. I couldn't tell you. I could not tell you what Everton women get with an average gate. I couldn't tell you. I think it's going to be interesting if how long they're going to play at Goodison Park. What I will say is this: over the years, the fan base in Liverpool, as in the city, not including all the fans from overseas, in the city used to be 50-50-ish. And obviously people will say, well, we've got Tranmere in the Merseyside. Yeah, Tranmere's in the Wirral. When you're looking at Liverpool on the Merseyside, it used to be 50-50. Now it's 60-30. The Wirral gets interesting because I think Tranmere, people don't realise how big a fan base Tranmere actually have locally in the Merseyside area, which is surprising. A little bit, and also Everton's failures plus young kids. The red blue divide divides families. Like you'll have one brother is a Liverpool fan, the other is an Everton fan. One uncle, same thing. Sisters, brothers, brother-in-laws, sister-in-law. It is literally you could have some families that are half and half. It's a fierce rivalry, yes, on the field. And you could argue at times throughout the history of the two clubs, it's been a bit tasty off the field as well. But for the most part, it's generally a pretty fun, good-natured rivalry in the city. It's less nasty than the old firm. Well, all the rivalries in Glasgow and Scotland, Manchester, London, Bristol, Sheffield. Other areas where you've got multiple clubs like Stoke, Port Vale, that kind of thing, where you've got multiple clubs in a location like London or Manchester or Bristol or Sheffield. For a multi-club city, the rivalry is a lot nicer, less nasty. Oh, well, Bristol Rovers, they've had money issues, but hey, look, they're still plugging away. There was a period where I can't remember if it was Bristol City or Bristol Rovers didn't have a stadium and they were playing in Bath, and the rival club burnt down the Bath wreck, basically, in '96. So, yeah, it's less intense than. So if you were to go to an estate or like an old terrace, for example, let's say an old terrace road in Liverpool, you will see kids wearing Liverpool and Everton shirts playing in the street, and it doesn't have the same at school. There'd be Liverpool and Everton. It'd be quite. You might even get like some of the sixth form colleges and university. You might get some Tranmere as well. The Merseyside clubs that dislike isn't there because Dixie Dean used to play for Tranmere before he played for Everton. There's a fun fact. And there's some players who played for both Everton and Liverpool, and then some Liverpool players who are lifelong Everton fans, and some Everton players that are lifelong Liverpool fans. And that's what a lot of people don't realise about that kind of the Merseyside kind of footballing dynamic. And I think John Aldridge, I think he played for Liverpool and Tranmere. Dixie Dean played for Tranmere and Everton. So there you go. There's a link. And so, yeah, you will see players will play for two of the three clubs on Merseyside in their careers, or maybe sometimes even all three. So it's one of them. Honestly, it's an interesting one, but when it comes down to it, at some point they would have probably met in the old Division 2 or cup competitions, things like that. But at the end of the day, like the rarity that the clubs meet, I think, has an impact. But when it comes to fans down the pub, I think honestly that the Tranmere, Liverpool, and Everton, for the most part, I think on Merseyside and that area, and Liverpool and Merseyside in general, the Birkenhead, Wirral, I think the rivalry between the three clubs and the fan base is pretty civil, really. I think a lot of you will have families that will have a Tranmere fan and an Everton and Liverpool will live in the same family in the Wirral. Whereas in Manchester or Greater Manchester, you've got to be careful what neighbourhood you walk in the Manchester area, and then you've got Oldham, you've got Rochdale, Bolton, Wigan, Bury. If you walk in the wrong area, you're in trouble. You're in serious trouble if you walk into the wrong pub or the. But it's like Sheffield, Wednesday and United. You walk into that wrong pub, you are at best black eye, at worst ICU. Bristol. My cousin found out because my cousin's an ex-Yeovil hooligan before he joined the armed forces, and he found out the hard way. He walks into a Gashead pub. And this is when Yeovil were a football league side, and he found out the hard way. Yeah, him and his mates got in a bit of a scrap, and they were outnumbered, and they got hurt. And yeah, it got nasty, and then they got their own back at a later date, but it got nasty, and machetes were pulled out. Let's just say that. So yes, there was still, and that's time. You go to Europe. So, oh God, if you were, let's say I'm going to say Rome, the eternal derby, Lazio Roma, I think is more dangerous than AC Inter. But the Torino derby is quite dangerous. And I remember I was on a school trip to Italy. We were in Rome, and we're just, in the centre of Rome, and there's our hotel. There's a bar opposite, and there's a restaurant around the corner. We're a bit of a iffy. I'm going to say red light district is a nice way to describe. The area of Rome we're in was a bit off. It wasn't quite, let's say, the Trevi Fountain or the Colosseum. It was an area like, think of it like just like around like the Rome equivalent of Clapham, right by a major railway station, the Termini main station, which is the biggest station in Rome. Bit like the red light district, but an informal. It wasn't the same. It wasn't the safest. After about 9 p.m, it was a bit dangerous. And there was a lad on the school trip who thought it'd be a fucking brilliant idea to walk into a Lazio bar wearing a Juventus shirt, and he thought it was a good idea to go into this Lazio Ultras bar, which is literally around the corner. Now, the Roma bar is right opposite the hotel. The Lazio bar is around the corner. And he thought it was a good idea to go into this Ultras bar. And as a 15-year-old lad, did not end well for him. It did not end well for this. His name was Dan Martin. It did not end well for him, especially when he comes running down pissing road towards our hotel with a good few of these Lazio Ultras with machetes and axes. And he's running, and he's like obviously screaming in English. And the Roma bar opposite, they've seen us for a couple of days, and it's also like a cafe as well. And they've seen us have coffees and go in there, and we're allowed to drink on the school trip because in Italy the drinking age is 14, and we're all 15, 16 years old. And the Roma Ultras see this, and they pile out of this bar, and they go up the road, and they've got axes and machetes, and this lad Dan runs past us, runs into the hotel, and he fucks off. And a few of us are outside, and I was one of those cheeky lads who was a bit of cheeky smoking. And I've got a fag hanging out going, what the And it is literally a what the moment. And we basically started a football riot. And I'm just like, it's a good thing I'm not wearing my insert Atalanta jersey right now, or my Udinese top, because I used to collect football jerseys, and I like Atalanta. I like it. Udinese. I have a soft spot for both clubs, but Atalanta is my Italian team because they're true underdogs. And I went, it's a good thing I've left them at home. And I've got to sit. I'm going, oh shit, literally, oh shit. And he was let's just say if he was any fatter, because he was quite a fat lad, if he was any slower running, he would have been dead. They would have killed him. They would have stabbed him up. That was my first experience of seeing like nut jobs in real life, not on video games or on a film, wielding machetes and axes and trying to kill someone. And I'm like, shit. And let's just say we all got the toolbox talk. Don't do that again, because the next day or the day after, we were going to Naples. We were going to an even more dangerous city. Oh my god! And do that to everyone. Well, as I say, the formation of Roma was done as a political move, and this is when Mussolini is in charge of Italy. Fascisti. Okay, we're going back to pre-World War II, when fascism is kind of popular in Italy, and Il Duce, the bald fat Italian, is in charge. And there was the military and the royalists in Italy didn't particularly like the fascists. There's political maneuverings in Rome at the time, and there's a lot of football clubs. There's about 5 or 6 football clubs in Rome at the time, and they wanted a strong club to counter the clubs in northern Italy like Bologna, Juventus, Torino, AC Milan, Inter Milan. Venezia, they actually won a Coppa Italia in the late 30s, I think, or 1940 or 1939, just at the beginning of World War II. So northern Italy's winning all the trophies. And they wanted basically a strong club in Rome, where the whole city can get behind and it's not political, and they can challenge the northern Italians, right? Because southern Italy was more pro-royalist, and not pro-fascist, because the fascists didn't like the mafia organisations and were busy shooting mafia members and supporters and rounding them up. So Rome's right in the middle of Italy, and they wanted basically a strong club in the capital to counter the northern clubs in the north and to challenge the success. And the only club in Rome that refuses to join this AS Roma is SS Lazio. And they pro-Mussolini, pro-fascist, historically, very right-wing. And they refuse to join. They refuse to join AS Roma. They refuse to merge in, and the rest is history. The rest is history. Roma is a royalist, monarchist attempt to counter fascism with the working classes, and also a footballing attempt, but also it's a political attempt. It's in the Roma video and the Lazio videos that I've done. I can't remember. I would have to go back, and I've got all my notebooks over there. I'd have to go find the right notebook with the Roma history video in it. And to be honest, that means digging through 5 different notebooks to find the right one. And to be honest, it's 7:30. I've been going for nearly 4 hours, and that's just energy I don't want to expend at this time. But yes, AS Roma, I think it's like 4 clubs, I think, in total, merged together. I think it's 4 or 5. And Lazio at the time refuse. And they go, no, we're not doing this. This is a political move to counter Mussolini and the fascist party in Rome, and counter the momentum. Because at this point, Mussolini's only been in power for a couple of years. The March on Rome only happened a few years before. And so this was seen by many as pushback against the dictatorship of Mussolini. And so there's a political element to this. And the rest is. I think it's about 1925. I've got to try and remember. I think it's about 1920. I'm going to have to look at AS Roma. I think it's about 1925. I could be wrong. I'm bearing in mind. I'm trying to remember a video I did 2 years ago, something like that. Palermo, Naples is not technically, because the Naples area, there's a couple of clubs in Campania that see Naples as a rival, but I've done the Napoli video, but I haven't done the rival clubs videos yet. Palermo is another one club city. Messina, Catania, Cagliari. Most of the Roman cities have one major club, and then the little clubs below them. AS Roma, here we go. They beat Pisa before the international break, but they lose to Torino. There you go. And on the 21st of September, Lazio in the Stadio Olimpico are the home team in the Eternal Derby. So that's going to be dangerous, very dangerous. And they're 6th at the moment with 6 points. 1927. Here we go. Right. Oh wow. Now I've got to remember. Cagliari is the biggest club in Sardinia, and it's the first club south of Rome to win the Scudetto in 1970. 1927, it was founded, and only one season outside the top flight, which was 1951, 1952. It's won Serie A 3 times. 41, 42. So in World War II, they were still playing. 82, 83, and 2000, 2001. There you go. Right. History. Here we go. Foundation. AS Roma was founded in the spring of 1927 when Italo Foschi initiated the merger of 3 clubs. Roman FC, SS Alba Audace, and Fortitudo Pro Roma SGS. There you go. Foschi He was a member of the Fascist Party. He was a member. The purpose of the merger was to give the Italian capital a strong club to rival the more dominant clubs of northern Italy. The only major Roman club to resist was Lazio because of the intervention of the army, General Vaccaro, a member of the club and executive of the Italian Football Federation. All three founding clubs were relegated, but the fascist-aligned FIGC bet over the capacity of the new team to give a stronger representation to the capital of Italy, and they were given a wild card for the Divisione Nazionale, which is Serie A. The club played its earliest seasons at the Monte Velodromo, Appios, so basically the Stade Velodrome in Rome, before moving to the Testa Chiocco. I've got to pronounce this because my Italian is not great. Testa Chiocco district of Rome, where they built the Campo Testa Chiocco, which was opened in 1929. They finished as runners-up within 3 years, and there you go. So Lazio was the fascist club, but then Lazio now become the. So Lazio were founded in 1900. They've only won the league twice, and they're less successful now. History. Here we go. It's in 1927. Lazio resisted the regime's attempts to merge the team. But for some reason, they've now become the right-wing club, whereas Roma have moved away from their right-wing roots. It's weird. Lazio were forcibly relegated in 1980 to Serie B. This is when Paolo Rossi goes to prison due to a remarkable scandal involving illegal bets on their own matches, along with Milan. They remained in Italy's second division for 3 seasons. Wow. Oh. Their worst season was 84-85, where they got 15 points and finished last. 86, they had a 9-point deduction. This is back in the day of a 2-point win for betting scandal involving another player, Claudio Vinazzini. And they nearly got relegated to Serie C. Jesus. Wow. And they had to play a playoff over Taranto, which is in southern Italy, and Campo Biaso, which is also in southern Italy. And then after that, they've been pretty good. Let's have a look at their supporters. Lazio supporters. Both Rome clubs haven't been that successful, really. No, they haven't. The Italian Lazio fans are called the Tifosera Laziale, or the Laziali. Racist and anti. There we go. Okay, so they. 90. Oh God, I can't repeat that on here. Wow. Yeah. Okay, so there is, the anti-Semitic stuff I cannot repeat on here. The racist chant one, 2023, a match between 4th of January, a match between Lazio and Lecce. Lecce players Samuel Umtini and Lamek Banda were the subject of racist chants by Lazio fans. The same year, but the following season, in November, Lazio supporters unfurled anti-Irish banners before and during their Champions League match with Celtic, which read, "The famine is over, go home, effing potato eaters, and did they take a shower today?" In response to a displayed banner by the Green Brigade at Celtic Park, which depicted Benito Mussolini upside down with the words, "Follow your leader." The anti-Semitic stuff Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know why they. Uh, mm. Let's have a look at La Roma. Yeah, they're not. Oh, well, again, I have to obviously explain. I had to explain sectarianism, but Lazio now are seen as more. Roma is the fifth most supported club. Okay. The traditional ultras of Roma were the Comando Ultra Curva Sud. The group was founded by a merger of many smaller groups, considered one of the most historic of the European football. Okay. So they're all Roma are still very right wing as well. But they're more left wing leaning now than what was in the 20s when the fascist government set them up. Although sections have a neo-fascist following as well. Oh, wow. In November 2015, Roma's Ultras and their Lazio counterparts, bearing in mind these guys really want to kill each other, boycotted Roma's 1-0 win in the capital derby in protest at new safety measures imposed at the Stadio Olimpico. The measures imposed by Rome's basically mayor, Franco Gabrielli, had involved plastic glass dividing walls installed in the Curva Sud and the Curva Nord. So the Curva Sud is Roma's end, and Curva Nord is Lazio's half of the stadium. Splitting the sections behind each goal in two, both sets of ultras continued their protest for the rest of the season, including Lazio's ultras returned to the Curva Nords in 2016, but Roma's continued to boycott. The most known club anthem is Roma, Roma, the title Roma is not to be questioned, it is to be loved. Wow. Obviously, Roma, many rivalries. Lazio, the derby between us called the Derby de Capitale is the most heated and emotional. The features some occasional instances of violence, some occasional, including the death of a Lazio fan, Vincenzo Paparelli, in the 78-80 season as a flare was fired into him and he died. The match March 2004 was abandoned because of rumours of a fatality, which led to like a massive riot. The rivalry against Napoli, the derby of the sun, is quite tasty. Milan, Atalanta is no longer friendly. Inter. Rivalries have escalated to serious violence. The devotees or the Fedayeen. They named that after Iranian guerrilla fighters. Daniele De Santis shot Ciro Esposito, who's a Napoli fan, dead. 26 years in prison. He got it reduced to 16 years on appeal. There you go. Roma Ultras displayed banners celebrating De Santis. Oh, God. Roma Ultras attacking foreign clubs. Knives, poles, flares, bottles, stones. Yeah. Home games against Liverpool, 84 2001, Middlesbrough 2006, Manchester United 07, Arsenal 09, Spurs in 2012, Chelsea 2017. Stabbings and injuries to foreign supporters. And of course, there was that 2018 game with the guy got his head stamped on. So, yeah. Roma Ultras a lovely bunch. The Lazio fans are worse. They are a lot worse. But AC and Inter, I remember was it a Champions League game where Dido got hit with the flare in the back of the neck and they were flowing. They got the Inter fans went a bit nuts and attacked Dido. I seem to remember the Atalanta Ultras decided to destroy their stadium one time. And I was actually in Italy at the time. This is when two Juventus fans were stabbed in the Lazio region, murdered, and 2 police officers were shot in their car in, I believe it was Catania or Messina in Sicily. They were just gunned down on their day off. And every ground in Italy, the police were like, we're at war with the ultras. And so in Atalanta, Atalanta were playing Inter. They went, let's just smash up our stadium just because we can. And Inter and Atalanta didn't fight each other. They fought the police. They were like, yeah, let's just do that. I was like, shit. Shared grounds. It doesn't happen often here. It has done. I don't know. Some leagues, like the Stadio Olimpico and San Siro, we see it. It doesn't happen often here. I don't know. I'm indifferent to it. I'm indifferent. I think it depends on the sport. We see it in rugby union. We see it in rugby league. We do see it in football. We see it in the NFL. With both New York franchises. Honestly, we've seen it in LA with the 2 LA franchises. I'm not bothered. It doesn't bother me. I think in regards to Italy, I think they're going to try and move away from the shared facilities. Germany, 1860 Munich and Bayern Munich, the Allianz Arena, when 1860 Munich are at a higher level. But in reality, it's more of an Italian thing, really, when it comes to sharing a stadium. It's more of an Italian thing. I can't see it continuing long term in Rome, for example, with the pure hatred between Roma and Lazio. And I can't. And obviously, the San Siro is getting demolished soon, and so that's going to be 2 new stadiums for both AC and Inter. It hasn't happened in Turin for a long time. And for the most part in Italy, it's normally one big club per city. So Milan, Turin, and Roma are outliers. So I can't see it going on long term. It's rare, but it does happen. But I can see in Italy that becoming a thing of the past soon. It's passed its sell by date a long time ago. It was upgraded for Italia 90. There's been a few tweaks since 1990, but it's ancient. It's well past its sell by date. It's crumbling. It is life expired. It was life expired for Italia 90. They just upgraded it. It is life expired, and it has been for a long time. And it needs replacing. And both Inter and AC are going to get new stadiums. So, while it's a sad day, it is on my bucket list. I don't think I'll be able to see it before it goes. But in his life, yeah, it's true. But that's it's a sign of the times, isn't it? It's a sign of the times. Anyway, I've been on now for nearly 4 hours. I need to get my dinner sorted. I'm going to call that a live stream. I want to really appreciate the discussion we've had. We've discussed a lot of stuff. Some interesting questions. We discussed a lot of things. I actually thought Lazio was the fascist club, but it was actually Roma, and Lazio was the army club. And then somehow it's flipped. That Roma are now more left-leaning, and Lazio are all right-wing. Although there are right-wing fans within the Roma fan base. That's a weird one. Yeah, no, I don't feel particularly hungry now. I've got a few snacks in my bag, but I want to have a hot meal for dinner. I want to have some hot food. So I'm going to call that a live stream. Thank you very much for the discussion. It's been very, very interesting this evening. I will say that. Very interesting this evening. Not the longest live stream we've done. We've had longer ones. And maybe at some point, maybe after the rugby on Saturday, maybe Sunday, we could have a longer live stream potentially. And yeah, we shall go from there. But well, the rugby, we've got the Women's Rugby World Cup semi-finals. So France playing New Zealand. No, England are playing France. New Zealand are playing Canada. Canada, New Zealand is Friday night. England, France is Saturday afternoon. That's the semi-finals. And then next weekend, so the week, not this weekend, next weekend is the third, fourth place playoff and the final. And then that's the tournament done. So there's only 4 games left in the Women's Rugby World Cup. And I think tomorrow I can do my thoughts on the tournament to this point, and we can go from there. But for me, for now, that is goodbye. I need to get some dinner on, but I appreciate all the questions, and I'll have some more content for you all very, very soon.